To start off, I'd like Doug Erickson to just summarize for us the technical issues on this meeting today. Go ahead, Doug.
Sure. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We have quite a few participants with us, 38 right now. So first thing I'm going to ask you to do is, if you are not a member of the Patton Township Board of Supervisors, please turn off your video and mute your sound. There'll be several opportunities to be called on as we go through the meeting. If you're not familiar with Zoom, generally either down along the bottom or along the top, if you hover your mouse over those, you'll find some icons. One looks like a microphone, one looks like a video. You can stop and start your video by clicking on the video icon. You can mute yourself or unmute yourself by clicking the microphone icon. There's probably 2 or 3 different ways to do it. As you get more adept with Zoom, you find different ways to mute and unmute. But again, I ask, if you're not a member of the Board of Supervisors, please turn your video off. If you're not, mute your microphone. Familiar with Zoom. As we go through the meeting, as I noted, there are several opportunities to make comments. There's one first opportunity will be when we get to item 2. That's for comments that are for items that are not on the agenda. And then for each matter that is on the agenda after that, the board will, or the chair of the board will call for public comments. At that time, either when we get to item 2 or the specific item, you can use the raise hand feature. Again, it'll be found along the bottom or top of your screen. Again, mouse over, you should see something that says reactions or I don't have it because I'm one of the hosts, but you'll find it either along the bottom or perhaps by clicking on your the participants icon at the bottom too. You should be able to find a way that'll say raise hand. You raise that electronic hand. Mr. Trevino, the chair, will be monitoring the screen, and will call on you one by one for your input. We'll note that all public comments are limited to 5 minutes each. General practice is that if there's a lot of comments, we will go around and let everyone comment first before we'll go back and let people come back up and comment a second time. With that, I believe I've covered the technical issues, and I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Trevino.
Okay, thanks, Doug. There's also for today's meeting a public access device set up in the township building. For people who don't have their own computer or smartphone that they can connect to Zoom, that device, the township building, main doors open, and if you wish to use that device, just go in the township building, make a left turn into the library, and you'll find the whatever it is a laptop or
it's an iPad.
It's an iPad sitting on the table there that you can utilize. So the Zoom is already set up. So all you have to do is point it at yourself. Also, if you don't have a way to connect with Zoom, you can also call in during the meeting. And the phone number is 929-205-6099. Again, that number is 929-205-6099. Also, I'd like to remind everyone that we wish to conduct a very cordial, a very positive meeting. So we ask for cooperation from all speakers to address your comments directly to the board, not to any other individual, but directly to the board. We'll allow you up to 5 minutes for your comments. Please keep them respectful. And I just have to reflect that we are all blessed to live in this country, that we can do this. Individual citizens have the right to speak up, voice their opinions, have them heard, have them considered, and I'm very grateful that we all have this opportunity. I'm pleased that at the previous board meetings where there were contentious issues, that the vast majority of the speakers were very polite, cordial, addressed the topics, the issue, and did not revert to any kind of personal attacks. So with that said, let's move on. First item on the agenda, it will be public comments, and these will, we invite anybody present who wishes to address the Board of Supervisors on a topic that's not already on the agenda. This is your opportunity to do so. If you do have a public comment to make, as Doug said, please utilize the raise hand feature on Zoom or so that I can recognize you. I don't see anyone raising their hand. So I presume that means at this time, we have no public comments. Next item on the agenda, number 3, presentations and public hearings. Item A, Spring Creek Watershed Commission, One Water Plan Proposal. And Mr. Paul Takak, Vice Chair of the Spring Creek Watershed Commission and College Township Council member, will talk to the board about this One Water Plan. Paul, go ahead. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I share my screen? Thank you. Let me try that again. Okay. Thank you very much.
No, we don't see it. There we go.
Not yet. Yes. How about now? You do see it?
Yes, we see that now. Go ahead, Paul.
Okay. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak with you tonight. The goal of this presentation is to provide a brief history of the Spring Creek Watershed Commission and its work. I'd also like to provide a brief update and synopsis of our recently completed Phase 2 report and to outline our future plans in order to gather your comments, your feedback, and we trust the endorsement of the Board of Supervisors. Bill Sharp, who, as you may know, is a longtime member of the Commission and is familiar with much of the history of our work, is also with me here to help answer any questions you may have following the presentation. And I also see that Doug Mason, your representative to the Watershed Commission, is on as well. So thank you to them for joining us. Before we go on, what is a One Water Plan? Briefly, it's an innovative and collaborative approach to water resource management, whereby municipalities can work together in order to maximize benefits, reduce redundancy, and save money. The long-term benefits of such an approach include not only a reliable, high-quality water supply and a healthy, sustainable ecosystem, but also enhanced economic and recreational opportunities that benefit everyone in the watershed. So with that, I'll proceed with a brief history of the Commission and its efforts to lay the foundation for just such a plan for the Spring Creek watershed, specifically why it's needed, who will benefit, and what is necessary in order to move forward and make that a reality. The Spring Creek watershed covers approximately 175 square miles, has a total population of over 130,000 people, and is highly developed along most of its length. The area is underlain by a karst geology, which supports a huge aquifer system that provides the majority of the water supply. But ultimately, all of that water comes from the sky, so it's very much a finite resource. The Spring Creek Watershed Commission was founded in 1996 to help develop a vision and a plan for the watershed's future. The membership of the commission consists of elected officials and representatives from 12 of the 14 municipalities in the watershed. This work is also supported by over 30 other stakeholders, including the Clearwater Conservancy, Trout Unlimited, and other nonprofits and community organizations, as well as water and wastewater authorities, local businesses, and county, regional, and state agencies. The mission statement of the Spring Creek Watershed Commission can be summarized in 3 words: vision, leadership, and planning. Specifically, the founding mission was to establish a long-term consensus vision for the watershed and to take a leadership role in the development of a comprehensive long-term watershed management plan in order to advance that vision and help guide future projects and programs on behalf of the member municipalities. In 2003, the Commission published a Phase 1 report to help guide development of the watershed and thoroughly analyze the overall environment, including the impact of population growth and land development. This Phase 1 effort had 2 primary objectives. The first was to develop a comprehensive matrix of the problems and challenges facing the watershed, as well as potential solutions in areas of future research. The second was to identify and organize information that already existed on the watershed, particularly surface and groundwater, the water supply, and land use. In addition, the report also began the process of compiling and researching other watershed reports and plans in order to help guide future efforts. Unfortunately, however, after this first report was completed, further progress stalled due to a lack of funds. Nearly 15 years later, the Commission started work on Phase 2 of the watershed plan. Roughly $16,000 in funding to support this effort was provided by local municipalities and authorities, as well as by Penn State, nonprofits, and businesses. This funding provided administrative support, including the hiring of a project facilitator. A work group was formed and developed additional background information. They also held several public forums and presentations to gather input from the community. This effort highlighted several key issues and concerns. The first was that population growth and land development was not only continuing, but accelerating. In addition, the lack of a comprehensive plan to identify and prioritize challenges, opportunities, and solutions greatly increased the risk that water resources might become insufficient to meet the future needs of the community and of the ecosystem. This is, of course, complicated by the fact that dozens of entities are responsible for making decisions about land and water use. All this and more clearly underscored the need for a more collaborative and cooperative approach. However, it also became abundantly clear that what was not needed is another bureaucratic or regulatory layer, but rather the development of robust partnerships between all of the stakeholders, including the public. The resulting Phase 2 report was approved by the Watershed Commission in December of 2019. It's available on our website, and I can send an email follow-up with links if you prefer for your convenience. The key findings of that report are captured in a revised, more forward-looking vision statement. The vision for the Spring Creek watershed is integrated collaborative management of water resources in an environmentally, economically, and socially beneficial manner. This vision emphasizes long-term resilience, reliability, and economic prosperity, as well as the importance of community and stakeholder involvement, but not more regulation or any effort to change local governance. Instead, improved communication and coordination will lead to significant benefits, including considerable savings by reducing duplication of effort and improving both efficiency and effectiveness. Such cooperation can also be expected to help in securing outside funding and grants. This report emphasizes that in order to make all of this happen, a Phase 3 planning effort was needed in order to develop a comprehensive 50-year roadmap for integrated water resource planning in the Spring Creek watershed, basically a One Water plan. So with that One Water plan as the goal, what are the next steps? Basically, there are 2. The first is to get consensus approval from a majority of the participating municipalities that the Commission should move forward with this Phase 3 effort. We hope this presentation, while brief, sufficiently describes the goals and benefits of undertaking this. However, it's important to emphasize that such authorization does not require or imply any funding commitment. As stated in the founding agreement, ongoing support of any Commission project is strictly voluntary on the part of each municipality. Upon approval, The Watershed Commission would then appoint a Phase 3 work group to guide the next phase of this project. The Phase 3 work group will be tasked with the following: to prepare a preliminary project plan and outline, to develop a realistic budget and pursue funding, particularly in light of the current challenges posed by the pandemic. It's anticipated the initial budget may be in the range of $35,000 to $45,000, but as the project develops, this could increase. It is, however, expected that much of this funding will be from outside agencies, authorities, and organizations, as well as any municipalities that are interested in contributing. As soon as feasible, the working group would also assist in contracting a project director and hopefully support staff. Additional responsibilities would include researching other One Water plans, engaging local, regional, and statewide stakeholders and the public, and providing regular progress reports and presentations to the Commission, to member municipalities, and to the public. Finally, the working group would help in producing the final Phase 3 One Water Plan report for consideration by the member municipalities. These efforts will, of course, be continuously monitored by both the Watershed Commission and the participating municipalities. The effort will be transparent, open, and inclusive, but most importantly, it will be collaborative rather than regulatory. In conclusion, a comprehensive One Water plan for the Spring Creek watershed will provide a strategic vision and framework to maintain economic and environmental prosperity and a high quality of life over the long term. Improvements in communication and collaboration are expected to lead to not only improved outcomes, but to considerable savings. But perhaps most importantly, this process will help build a greater sense of community and confidence in our collective future. We ask you to support this effort and consider approval of the non-binding resolution provided as part of your meeting packet. Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and take any questions if you have any.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Could you go ahead and stop sharing your screen so we can see everybody's?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you. Okay, first I'll ask the Board of Supervisors if they have any questions or comments for Mr. Takak. Betsy Whitman, go ahead, you're first.
I think Pam was first, actually.
Okay, Pam, go ahead.
Paul, I just have a question. How many of the other municipalities have seen your presentation? It's very extensive and very good.
Oh, thank you very much. Actually 3 so far, Ferguson, College, and Half Moon. They've all approved moving forward. We've also presented to the Benner Water Authority, to the Nittany Valley Environmental Coalition, the Sierra Club, and most recently Trout Unlimited.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, Betsy, go ahead.
Oh, great. Thank Paul. Excellent, as usual.
Yeah.
A couple of questions about the timeline. When do you anticipate starting this? And apologies if you already mentioned that and I missed it. It occurred to me I was thinking about something else. So when starting it, do you have any potential funders lined up? And then what's the timeline for completion of this?
Let me take those in sort of the order that you asked them. One is we're just starting this effort. With the pandemic, 2020 was kind of lost. So we spent some time putting together this presentation to kind of restart the process. We'll be able to move forward when a majority of the member municipalities approve that effort. We expect that to happen this summer. Hopefully by September, we'll be in a position that we can actually begin to form that Phase 3 working group. The funding for that, we have several groups that have already expressed an interest in potentially helping fund that effort. But really, in order to get started and to develop the budget, it isn't necessary to have funds in order to form the working group. That's really more for getting the the project director and some of the other
Mhm.
resources that might be helpful. We do have several interested parties, and we hope that some of the stimulus funding and some other things that are probably going to be available through the American Rescue Plan and some other things may help us in that regard, with the funding. But that's kind of a unknown, to be quite honest, at this point. But we're confident we'll do well on that front. And then the timeline for completion, it really depends on. I'm going to defer to Bill Sharp on some of this, but because he's much more of an expert on the water side, on the technical side, than I am. But I believe that a lot of the elements are already in place. This is really an effort to kind of bring folks together and agree on a framework and agree on a consensus vision. And that's what's going to guide things moving forward. So I don't know that there's a lot more that needs to be done, but we have to bring everybody to the table and build that consensus.
Great, thanks. I just want to make sure that if you do need funds from municipalities, it's certainly something that I would be willing to entertain, and make sure that you get that information to us in time to put in our budget.
Will do. Thank
Great.
you very much.
Okay, Anita, you're next. Go ahead.
I agree with Supervisor Robb and Supervisor Whitman that this is an excellent proposal, and I propose that we express our support for it.
Okay, before we get to any kind of vote, I'm going to open the floor for public comment. So anybody on here who wishes to ask a question or make a comment about this proposal, this is your chance to do so. Please use the raise hand feature so I can identify you. I don't see anybody raising their hand. So I assume there are no citizen comments to be made. So now, Board of Supervisors, and I forgot to mention, one of our members can't be present at the meeting today, Mr. Elliot Abrams. So there's just 4 of us present for this meeting. Still a quorum. Members of the board, there you have in your packet a draft resolution, a generic resolution, a sample resolution. It's not written specifically for Patton Township, but one option is for the board to support converting this sample into a resolution draft, which we would take up at our next meeting next month. Another option is simply say, yes, so we agree, although without passing a resolution. It could be a consensus of the board that we would support the begin to initiate the phase 3 efforts. And the third option is just simply say, thank you very much, best wishes. So Paul, you have a comment you want to make first?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to ask, and I understand I'm not supposed to ask a question of someone who's not on the Board of Supervisors, but I am not sure whether we need a formal resolution passed in order to confer agreement per the Articles of Agreement. So I would have to check on whether we need more than just a consensus vote, whether we actually do need a resolution of support. I don't know that answer. Bill Sharp may know that answer. I'm not sure.
Bill, go ahead. You have the floor.
The resolution was something to help the boards of supervisors support this, but under the Articles of Agreement, a simple approval by the Board of Supervisor would be sufficient to move us forward. That a majority of the member municipalities must support it in order for us to go forward, but I do not believe we have to formally have a resolution.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. All right, board members, what's your pleasure? Pam, go ahead.
Anita made the first motion. I second it to move forward
With or without a resolution?
without a resolution.
Okay, Anita accepts that. Betsy, any comments?
Just agreement,
Okay,
waiting for the vote.
all right, let's do that. Let's have a vote on the motion to tell the Spring Creek Watershed Commission Patton Township supports their phase 3 efforts. All those in favor say aye, raise your hand so I can see your hands. Yes.
Aye.
Everyone said aye. So the vote is, the motion's passed. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Bill. Also, Doug Mason. Doug Mason is Patton Township's representative to the Spring Creek Watershed Commission. Thank you, Doug, for all your efforts on behalf of the board. Okay.
Thank you all very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Now, moving on. Item number 3B, noise complaint, Green Hollow Park pickleball courts. The agenda has a summary of actions that have occurred over the last 2 months since we first took this issue up. And the first thing I'd like to do, because we have a formal request of the Board of Supervisors submitted by Township resident Stephen Garcia. And I'd like to get this discussed and decision made on his request before we move on to general comments from the public about the issue. Mr. Garcia wrote to the Board of Supervisors saying, I request the Board of Supervisors ask the solicitor to provide a written response as to why the popping volume, frequency, and pattern of pickleball noise coming from Green Hollow Park is not applicable to the Township's Municipal Code, Chapter 105. Additionally, I request a written response as to why the township itself shouldn't be held accountable for allowing unreasonable noise to be made in Green Hollow Park. So my assessment is that we're being given a specific request, and we have, I think, around three options, maybe more. One option is to grant Mr. Garcia's request and consult with our solicitor to address Mr. Garcia's specific request. And we won't do that tonight. We would do that probably in a executive session, so we can have discussion related to legal issues and so forth. Second option would be to simply acknowledge that we received this request and move on without taking action on it. Third option would be to say the Board of Supervisors agrees with Mr. Garcia's assessment, his opinion about the municipal code, and pursue further action related to that. So this is a discussion just for the Board of Supervisors because it was addressed directly to us. I'll not be taking public comments on this particular issue. So Board of Supervisors, what's your pleasure? Ms. Tees, Anita, go ahead.
Thank you. I wish to acknowledge the legal request of a township resident, Mr. Garcia. I know that our police have been very thorough in their understanding and applying our various ordinances. But in respect, or to show respect and to acknowledge this legal request by Mr. Garcia, I believe that we should ask our solicitor to review the matter and to meet with our solicitor in an executive session before the next board meeting.
Anita, Betsy or Pam, what's your thoughts on this? Go ahead, Betsy.
I would like to second that. Or
Uh,
I agree with that, whether it was made as a formal motion or not.
Ms. Rob, what's your
Same, I
question?
agree. I agree. We need to meet with the solicitor on this issue.
Okay, and I agree as well. So, Doug, do you think we need a motion on this, or is that a consensus sufficient?
We don't need a motion.
Okay, so
We've got the dialogue, so we'll
okay.
schedule that for.
So that's settled as far as what action the board takes today on Mr. Garcia's request. Now let's go ahead with the rest of the agenda item on noise complaint, Brigham Hollow Park. Doug, do you want to summarize where we stand right now?
Let me just go over the information that we had included in the agenda along with what was, the attachment. There was a attachment which included a summary of the last advisory committee meeting, so the board could get a sense of the things we're discussing there. There was also the list of options that we've been looking at that was attached to that advisory committee meeting, and some estimates of costs that we've collected. Also, the next thing we've had, actually, I think there were 3 attachments that were connected to public comments that have come in at various times over the last few weeks. So items 3B2, 3B4, and 3B6, which came out today, were all public comments provided by residents and pickleball players. Item 3B3 was distributed on Tuesday. That was an engineering study that was performed by our Public Works Department. There had been a question had been raised about sight distance for cars on Sierra Lane, making a left-hand turn into Cornwall. The study did find that there is an impediment to that sight distance. It's hard to see in that photo, but we probably need to remove parking for 2 of those cars up from where Alex has her hand there. So that's something that we can do as a temporary measure before we can get a ordinance in place. I'll probably recommend that the board authorize the placement of temporary no parking signs from, I think, 40 feet there to clear up that sight distance issue. If there are any questions on that, we can come back to that. Item 3B5 was Mr. Garcia's request. Item 3B6 was a report that had been provided by the Recreation Advisory Committee. Supervisor Abrams had reached out to Ms. Wheeler last week and asked that the committee take a quick look at where could pickleball courts be placed in other parks in Patton Township. If you see on the first page of the attachment there, the Recreation Advisory Committee looked at 5 criteria related to where it might be possible to put pickleball courts in a park. They looked at the size of parks, whether the park was already fully developed by its master plan, whether there's enough space in there to put at least 3 or 4 courts, noting that pickleball is a social sport in addition to being an exercise opportunity. They also set one criteria that the court should be at least 500 feet away from homes, and that the park also has suitable parking opportunities. To make a long story short, when they applied all those criteria, the only park that ended up meeting all those criteria is Burnell Road Park. We've talked about that area before. The RAC had noted that maybe Ambleside Park might be a possibility. They didn't have all the information on distances when they reviewed that last night, but we did look at some distances this morning, and Ambleside Park is not big enough to stay 500 feet away from home. So again, we're left with Burnell Road Park at this time based on this criteria, and we've already been looking at putting, I think at this point, 3 or 4 courts in an area that was previously graded and set aside for tennis courts. And I think with that, that covers all the attachments and everything. It looks like we have several people with us tonight that are both members of the advisory committee and have spoken in the past. There's nothing specific otherwise that the board needs to take action on, but I would recommend that you open up for public comments.
And we shall do that. Open for public comments now. Use the raise hand feature. I apologize in advance if I don't get the order straight of who was first, second, third, etc. I will give everyone a chance. Remember your comments, please keep them under 5 minutes. So first hand was Mr. Stephen Esky. Go ahead, Mr. Esky.
Thank you. I do appreciate the sightline study and your moves towards alleviating the issue of parking down all the way down towards Cornwall Road. My only question is, by limiting the parking down one side of Sierra, are we then opening up parking to the other side of Sierra and creating a one-lane road, kind of a bottleneck through that space? Thank you for recognizing me.
Doug, you want to respond to that question? His concern is that,
Yeah, our response would be that we continue to ask the pickleball players to park on the park side on Sierra. If Sierra is full in the area, the remaining area, that they players park over on Park Forest, again, along the park side only and in front of the park. I think between the two of them, we probably have enough room for everybody.
and also I noticed there was in the Public Works recommendation was also lining parking spaces, designating parking spaces with lines. Is that something we can do? Does the board have to approve that, or is that something the Public Works can go ahead and do?
No, that doesn't need approval. If we'd like your input, of course, but that was a proposal we'd looked at to, again, provide some gaps between cars so people could feel a little safer crossing the road and keep it a little more organized. But if the board would like, then we can have Public Works get that into their work plan.
I don't see any objections from the other members of the board, so I think you can go ahead and have them do that. I think next was Brandon McDonough. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Trevino. First off, I wanted to call out that I actually submitted a letter with a written request similar to Mr. Garcia's on June 9th, and it wasn't included in the attachments. I don't know if there's a way that I can forward it again with the clarification of the noise ordinance request specific to unreasonable noise and the location. I can resend that. But I also wanted to bring up, it seemed like the discussion of park classifications such as neighborhood and community and regional park was useful to the board during the May 26th meeting. And I'd like to take a minute to expand upon that a little bit.
Yeah, keep it under 5 minutes, please.
Yeah, that's fine. Yep. I just wanted to point the board to the Center Region Comprehensive Recreation Parks and Open Space Plan from January 2020. In that report or in that plan, it designated Green Hollow Park as a neighborhood park, specifically on page 47 of the plan. And it went on to define what a neighborhood park was, and it being a focus of the neighborhood in walking or biking distance of its visitors, that it contributes to a neighborhood sense of identity, establishes a sense of community within the surrounding area, and then most importantly, establishes a service radius of a half a mile. I think like this really trumps the issue of the parking. You know, with it being designated a neighborhood park versus a regional park or community park, the parking almost becomes a non-factor there if you're looking at those classifications. It's clear that the COG comprehensive report is using the NRPA's classification system. And you know, those guidelines say that neighborhood parks are not intended to be used for programmed activities that cause parking problems or congestions, with the exception of limited use by sports teams. That's again coming from the NRPA guidelines. You know, again, I submitted that plan and those guidelines definitions to Mr. Erickson and just the general Patton Township email address on June 9. I'd happily share them again. You know, on the other hand, community parks such as Burnell, as defined in the plan, offers more opportunity for fitness and wellness opportunities for a wider service area, includes amenities like off-street parking and loosely organized adult sports programming. Again, that's from the COG plan. So I just wanted to point that out, and also note that I did also request the written clarification for the noise ordinance, and I'll yield back my time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. McDonough. I can assure you that all the board members received your what you sent to us. You know, it was quite well referenced, and including the relevant pages from one of the manuals. I don't recall the manual, but so yes, we all read it. The Board of Supervisors have already received that and read it. So I don't think you need to send that to us again. Next, Mary Bellman, then Stephen Garcia, and Gregory Huff, and then Teresa Vesio. So Mary Bellman, please, you can unmute yourself. You have the floor.
There I am. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I apologize, I got some sun coming in behind me. And just to follow up from Brandon's comment, that actually was one of the attachments. It's buried under 3.2. So we did get that as part of the attachments, but you have to kind of scroll down. So for that as a reference. So I live at 457 Sierra Lane. I've owned my home here for 6 years. So Green Hollow Park is literally my backyard. And I want to just thank everyone for like all the effort and time. I haven't been able to attend one of the meetings yet because I normally have a work conflict at this time, but I have written a letter, and I appreciate everyone's like energy and time and attention. I wanted to add a couple other comments that I don't think have been made. Mostly I wanted to sort of suggest a reframing of this. I feel like it's been framed as like the pickleball players and then over, you know, and then those of us who live around the park. And I don't think we're sort of two sides, and we're also not sort of equivalently impacted, or, you know, it's not the same. And let me just say a little bit about why I think that. So, you know, we're not like a political debate. We didn't sort of vote on this. I thought if it was like a debate, like a us versus them, we could like pitch the tennis players against the pickleball players, and they could like hash out the better sport. That would be like a frame of like two sides. I don't actually play either sport. And to me, this is also, I've heard a lot of comments about like the growing demand for pickleball, which is great. I just don't think that's a problem that our local board or township needs to solve. That's not how I understand local governance. So to me, these two sides just don't have equivalency. We have, you know, players of a sport who've got other places to play, who certainly should have a chance to play their sport. Like no one is against that. So I just want to not frame this as about the sport or the players at the core issue. I think it's really about the negatively impacted neighbors like us. We hear this noise all day long, every day. I do really appreciate being able to have a couple cups of coffee on Saturday and Sunday now before it starts. But it's not going away, even when other courts are built. And even when there's one one court in play, that is disruptive. I can't open my windows. I can't sit outside. I can't have a conversation on my deck during pickleball play with one court in use. And if you close your windows, you can still hear it. So like, that's just the reality, right? And I realize this was not the intent of the board. I really did appreciate the letter by my neighbors about the noise ordinance, but I think the issue needs to be between the impacted residents and our elected representatives who authorized this construction. So I want to reject the frame. And I guess that leads me to this idea. I feel like the committee that's been working seems to have been tasked on coming up with a compromise between players and the residents. And I just don't think that's a correct framing, because like I said, the groups are quite different. Like I can't use my property as intended. I'm sure I won't be able to sell it. You know, my neighbor down the street, they showed their house on a day there was no pickleball because of the weather. So it's to say that like we should find a compromise between these two groups seems to me just like not the right frame. I really think that there's only one. We're not all going to be able to live with the same solution. I mean, I wish we could do that. Like that's this, you know, the spirit of compromise is what we all want. But I don't think folks who are coming here to play, which of course they would and they should just because it was built here, should have the same say as those of us who live with this every day. And I'm pretty sure they don't want to live in my house. I would invite anyone over to have a cup of coffee with me on my deck if you doubt that. So my point is that the court should not have been built here. I hope that there's some agreement about that. And our houses are always going to be too close. We're always going to have parking issues for the reasons that Brandon raised. The neighborhood park is not intended to serve a larger community. So I don't think we need more studies and more committees. And I want to ask the board I understand that folks need a place to play. I want to ask the board to consider removing the nets as soon as the Y courts are completed. And you know, those of us who live around Green Hollow, we're just not going anywhere. We're going to continue to live with this issue. And I don't want to have any folks waste more time and energy trying to come up with solutions that aren't really a solution. Thank you for listening to my comments. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for your comments. Next, Mr. Garcia. Yes, go ahead. You have the floor.
Hey, thanks a lot. I appreciate the opportunity. So I've got three things that I just wanted to cover. First being the Patton Township Municipal Code of 105. So Chief Jolly and Mr. Erickson both say that 105 is not applicable when it comes to pickleball in Green Hollow. Neither one of them can provide me an explanation as to why. This is a violation that's actually, it's pretty much applicable not to the people that are playing in the public park, but rather should actually be directed to the township for enabling this continuance of a unreasonable noise. You know, we would hope that our local government would uphold the laws that they created to protect us, the residents, rather than circumvent them, you know, just to avoid responsibility. So ultimately, when I reached out to Chief Jolly, he recommended that I reach out to Mr. Erickson and ask that the solicitor provide me with that written explanation as to applicability. Mr. Erickson's response was the solicitor works for the pleasure of the Board of Supervisors to provide legal guidance to them and township staff. And as such, the solicitor's scope of duty is not responsible or is not to respond directly to residents. Sure, that's fine. So Mr. Erickson had provided me with a couple of recommendations. One was to do what I did here, where I requested the board to ask the solicitor for, which is, he puts it as for an option I desire, which I'm not looking for an option, I'm looking for a fact. Secondly, he said that I should retain my legal counsel for an opinion on the matter. That's already been established. My counsel is actually extremely well versed in federal, state, and local law. The only question is why Patton Township interprets the law differently. We need to really understand why 105 is not applicable when the code clearly reads that it is. Second thing that I have to talk about is 42 US Code 12101B1 Title II, which is also known as Title II of the Americans with Disability Act. Federal law clearly states that when a primary feature of a public park is altered, 20% of that project cost must be used to create an accessible path of travel to that altered location. I don't know if any of you have actually been to Green Hollow. Green Hollow is not accessible, one, from any of the street entrances. None of it's ADA compliant, but there's absolutely no path whatsoever going to the pickleball courts. It's all grass or dirt and ruts. It's not accessible whatsoever. So, you know, Mr. Erickson felt that ADA law wasn't applicable in this matter. Federal law is. You know, eventually get acknowledged that Mr. Erickson did find out that they received incorrect advice from a consultant. I'm just pointing out that's a big mistake, and hopefully you guys aren't working with that consultant anymore. Third, I want to talk about the sound study that Mr. Erickson approved for late June, late July. First off, the committee never agreed to this, so he kind of took that on his own. Secondly, even though there might be less noise, traffic, and parking in July, players are eventually going to start overflowing from the Y and coming back to the Green Hollow. It's been mentioned multiple times how much the players love Green Hollow Park, and I've seen articles already saying that Green Hollow can't even maintain the number of players that are going there. So, add that to the players coming from outside State College, add that to the players that are not from the Y, and also add the expected exponential growth of new players. This is going to be an issue again. Even though we see a less of an impact in the next few months, we're going to be right back in the same situation. So ultimately, a regional park is better suited to accommodate dedicated pickleball courts, traffic, parking, noise, accessibility. And ultimately, we need to really focus on fixing this problem. And just like what Mary had said, I want to emphasize that I have requested as a committee member and also as a resident that I'm emphasizing that we remove those nets as soon as the Y courts are open. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Garcia. Doug, do you, first of all, let me just say, Kate Mont, I saw your message. I put you in the lineup here. You're going to be number 4. We're going to have Gregory Huff, Drew Von Tisch, Juliana Kay, and then Kate Mont in that order. Doug, you want to respond about the ADA thing, because I saw that in the RAC minutes that the ADA, there's already construction going on to provide.
We haven't started construction yet, but we are actually taking bids right now to begin that construction on the ADA accessibility. We're going to do it in 2 phases. Phase 1 will be this year. That'll be access basically down the hill from Park Forest Avenue into the park. We're expecting that to come in, cost about $35,000, $38,000. Phase 2 then will provide additional ADA accessibility to all the primary features within the park. Phase 2 is estimated to cost $68,000. So that work is underway. Mr. Garcia is correct. We had an incorrect understanding. We were wrong. We'll just put it that way about when ADA accommodations are required. We've cleared that up. But I said, as I noted, we'd started design late last year, and we're going to start proceeding with construction yet this year. In terms of the noise study, I believe Susan told me they're going to start tomorrow. They'll do a 7 to 10 day collection of data. We're just collecting data at this point. We are going to collect what we call the, before the Y courts open, we'll collect 7 to 10 days worth of data. we'll have them go back in late July or sometime in August after the Y courts have been open for a while. We'll collect another set of data, just see what the change is. And if we need to go back at some point in the future, obviously we can go back and have them go back out again and see. Again, we haven't defined exactly what the standard is that we'll be using to look at everything, but we're at least going to get the data, the sound data, so we have that information before the Y courts open.
Thank you, Doug. Okay, we'll move back to our lineup here. My memory is that Gregory Huff is next. Go ahead.
Thanks for having me on again. Appreciate it. I'm actually here enjoying one of our public resources right now. I'm at the Park Forest Pool with my family. I wanted to kind of get back on and ask that we remove all of the sort of pickleball only playing in that court. Of course, when the nets come down, as a neighborhood court, as a neighborhood sort of resource, what we have in that park is that's one of our flat spaces for all of our families to use for different things. And I think when we take that away by saying it's exclusive, what we're also saying is that if somebody wants to come in and take our, basically say, hey, look, you got a baseball diamond. So there's no more having picnics in the park. There's no more doing any of this other stuff out in the grassy field area. If we want to do this at the basketball court, which, by the way, I'll make this a request. Can we get the basketball court resurfaced? But we need to have these spots back open. I think, this notion that's a neighborhood court is that gets used for all of our neighborhood stuff. We have kids that go down there and play and jump rope, or we did. Now we're kind of all terrified of going down there. I don't like living, with this notion that if we go down there and we try and do something on the court, we're going to get in trouble. It's supposed to be our neighborhood park. And so what I'd ask is that, when we take the nets down, the cheapest thing for us to do is just go ahead and put those tennis courts back up, because no one really ever had a problem with those. And then we make it a multi-use facility. We can just write that in. I looked at the code earlier too. We can just say, hey, look, let's make every field on here multi-use and just move forward. We can all live together and enjoy this park. It's our neighborhood park. No one ever really had problems with this before. And so, these are great things, man. Like I really dig this. And so, I don't want to be against the pickleball players. I wish they could build the Taj Mahal of pickleball courts and they can get at it, man. Like, that's cool. But I want our neighborhood park to be a neighborhood park, not a regional facility for, national pickleball players to come and basically, be like if I was at the pool here and we said, okay, we're going to invite national swim teams here, and then eventually none of our neighborhood kids could go swim at the pool. Anytime I'll go down to the courts, if there's kids playing, I don't interrupt them. If I see anything else going on with the kids, that's really for them. I'd like to play sometimes basketball or something else. If they're down there riding bikes on the basketball court or doing something else, I usually just talk to their parents and I'll come back some other time. So I'd like to keep that up. This is our neighborhood park. This is where we meet, we greet, we talk, we sled in the winter. We want to talk about putting an ice rink down there. That'd be fabulous. But we like to get this back. And so I'd ask that we kind of take these signs down that say this is exclusively pickleball, because not all of us play pickleball. I don't really have an opinion about this, but I do know that we really miss going down there riding our bikes. I sometimes take 5, 6, 7 kids down there, get them out of the parents' house. We go down there, we ride laps, practice changing gears, just being able to ride a bike, toddlers on their scooters, all these places. That's a fabulous area to do that because the fence keeps everyone safe inside and we're contained. Anyway, I think all this leads to these problems that we're having with, the pickleball courts are just not be there. And so I think rather than us trying to fit solutions into this that don't really exist, let's just go ahead and put the nets, the tennis court back there, find a place for the pickleball players to go, and we can just kind of go on with life. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Now, next we're going to, I think, Drew. Yes, Julianne, so you raised your hand. You're in the lineup, but you're not next. Drew Von Tisch. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you next? Okay. All right, Juliana, and then Drew. So Juliana, go ahead. You have the floor. I apologize.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I did want to mention something. I don't know if I read it incorrectly when you were going over. I don't know. It was like item 3.3 or whatever. Did I see that it said it would be $115,000 to add courts at Burnell? Can somebody confirm that?
Doug?
I believe that's the estimate that we're working with right now.
Okay. So I do remember us saying that the courts at Green Hollow already had cost $82,000, which that's fine. The money is gone now. My taxes went to something. And now another set of my taxes is going to $115,000 for courts that are already constructed, which is, I just want to make that a fact. And then you said $35,000 for better sidewalks and then $68,000 to make them ADA compliant, which I firmly think is a great thing. I personally have been on crutches and unable to like get around as well recently. And I remember walking down to the courts and I had my fiance holding me because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to step in a hole. I'm going to fall down these, down the sidewalk. So I think that that's a great thing that is occurring. I know it's already been mentioned that the resale values of homes was not affected by the pickleball courts. So I don't feel like that should continue to be brought up. It's already been dismissed. It's already been proven by a realtor to not matter. As a person who lives in the neighborhood, though, we're talking about this being a neighborhood park, and I agree with you. It is a neighborhood park, and I live in the neighborhood, and I use the park the way it should be used. I use the pickleball courts to play pickleball, and if somebody wants to ride the bikes on the courts, be my guest. When I showed up at the courts back in March of 2020, there was a metal sign that said, "These are pickleball courts. Do not ride your bikes on them." Did I think that was a little harsh? Because I remember being 11, like riding my Razor scooter around. I thought it was a little harsh, but that was the sign that was posted. I don't know what happened to that sign, like disappeared like a something in the wind. But anywho, so these are neighborhood courts, and there are people in the neighborhood who do use them. I've seen people out there using them for tennis. I've seen students who live in the oh my goodness, I can't remember the name of the townhouses or the apartments that are in the neighborhood. Either way, I've seen students using them. This really has become I mentioned in an email to Doug that this really has become a great resource and outreach for students who might live in Patton Township, whose taxes go to Patton Township, and who were not able to go to campus, who had every single class online. I remember getting to meet tons of those kids and getting able to do outreach with them as an alumni and getting reach out to them and offer them resources that I wouldn't have been able to if I hadn't met them at the Park Forest Green Hollow Park. If we're going to talk about noise, there was a girl who for an hour sat and just hit a softball with that metal bat. And my God, I bet that was annoying too. So it is a park. And I understand it's so annoying. And I do, because I play and I'm like, damn, that's annoying. But we put $82,000 as a community into this park, and to invest another, we'll estimate almost $200,000 into another park just doesn't seem reasonable. And making this contingent on the Y, that's a private facility. If I don't feel like putting money into the Y, I don't need to. I work, and I work at times. I work at the high school, and I'm not going to be able to be there from what's Y open, like 10 to 5 or like 9 to 5. I have a job. I like to use the public park because I can show up there at 9 a.m. or from like 6 to 7 p.m. and be able to hit the ball with a couple of friends, or on the weekends do the same. So I don't think saying, well, as soon as they go to the Y, we can cut the nets down. I just don't think that that's fair to those of us in the neighborhood who pay taxes for those beautiful courts. I think that was all of the points I had. Also this point that we're like bringing in people from all over the country, we're not. I don't know where this notion came from. I don't know we're not. We had somebody's nephew come once from Indiana. I had a friend who I know very dearly come from Georgia. They're not coming from all over the world. They're coming to visit us. And I'm like, oh, hey, come to the park and play pickleball with me. It's not like recruiting people from Texas to train here. This isn't the Olympic Training Center. And I just wanted to make that a point because I keep hearing it repeated and I just feel like it's exhausted. Well, thank you. I hope everybody has a good day otherwise. Happy Father's Day.
Thank you very much for your comments. I'm going to go to the two people who who weren't able to raise hands. Kate Mont first and then Kim Beatty. So Kate Mont, you have the floor.
I'm not sure how to get my video to start. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Don't worry
Okay.
about.
Oh, there I am.
There you
Hello.
go. Go ahead.
My name is Kate Mount. I live up on Norwood. We are in our 27th year here. We raised two boys who are now obviously adults. So they were raised as little kids down in Green Hollow. Just want to say that. And you'll forgive me for reading what I would say off the top of my head. I appreciate all of you who made the decision to put the courts in Green Hollow Park and paid an enormous amount of money for them are in a terrible position right now. I also know that all of the residents who live near, around, by, or on top of Green Hollow are being negatively affected every single day by the courts. So that puts all of us in a terrible position too. I also understand that the noise and the parking hazards may not have been known or fully thought out prior to the installation, and that is unfortunate, but here we are. There are really no studies that need to be done or committees that need to be formed. All you have to do is ask the people who live up and down Park Forest Avenue, Sierra, Norwood, and Laurel. We can tell you, and you don't have to pay us to tell you, this extraordinarily popular and very cool game is loud, distracting, and irritating all the time, and it's nearly impossible to live with. Why would anyone spend one more dime or one more precious moment of time discussing that, measuring it, detailing anything about it? Either you're going to get rid of the courts or you're not. Either you're going to put the tennis courts back in or you're not. Isn't it okay for someone who has the authority to take them out, to say that a mistake was made and now we're just going to fix it? This isn't really a complicated decision. I understand it's a complicated decision because money's wrapped around it, but the actual decision itself seems so obvious. Find someplace else to play that doesn't negatively impact an entire neighborhood. My guess is that if it were in any one of your backyards, your perspective would be dramatically changed. Making this more complicated and dragging out the decision only adds to the divisiveness that's already brewing between the players and the residents. I think that all of us are doing our very best to be good neighbors, friendly when we run into each other while walking through the park, or as we run into each other while they try to find a place to park. This is not in any way directed toward our fellow State College friends who enjoy the game, but please, what more is there to discuss? Having the pickleball courts in Green Hollow is unacceptable, and we'd like them taken out. And we just want to know, is that a real possibility, or are we just going to discuss in committee and do noise studies like until, like, I hear you mention mid-August, and I think, oh my gosh, that's our summer out on our deck. That's it. So anyway, I just want to say two more things really quickly. The last meeting I was at, people said that just so that we could quote unquote sleep in, that they were going to push the times back on the weekend that the pickleballers could play. And I just want to say that I was just a little bit insulted by that because it has nothing to do with sleeping in. I mean, we all get up and exercise, and we just do it in a way that doesn't impact someone else's neighborhood. So I just want to say that. And I also just want to address the point of where we got the idea that it was going to bring in a multitude and many other pickleball players was from a representative of the pickleball players. He was the one that said how much business he was bringing in to the area. So that's where that thought and that theory of the how much business it was going to bring in and how good that was from his perspective. So that's where that came from. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Kim Beatty, you're next.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I live in Patton Township. I have been in my home for 15 years. I live on Devonshire Drive, and I actually do walk to the park. I wanted to go back. A gentleman had mentioned the NRPA, which is the National Recreation Parks Association. I am actually a member of the NRPA along with the Pennsylvania Recreation and Park Society. And although the NRPA supports the idea of neighborhoods and municipal parks, they also support the idea that parks and green spaces are there for play and organized recreation. So it's not unusual that you would see in the township, most of your parks have some types of amenities or facilities that allow people to recreate. So whether they're ball fields or tennis courts, I mean, you live in Patton Township is even fortunate enough to have a swimming pool located in Patton Township. I can't imagine that it would ever be a situation where the swimming pool would be removed. And that swimming pool is actually very close to many neighbors. So clearly I'm fortunate. I have a lot of parks that I can walk to, and the facilities support that idea of recreation and play, which is also supported by the NRPA. I'm sorry, I can't remember the gentleman who brought up the National Recreational Parks Association. Please keep in mind that the pickleball courts are not a complex. There are no lights there. There are no concessions. There are no vendors there. This is a grassroots organization. Yes, some of us live in the neighborhood like myself and some do not, who want to play pickleball. If you look at the Center Region Parks and Recreation mission, you'll see that part of their mission supports the idea of organized recreation and having facilities that people can enjoy. I don't remember, I wrote it in my letter, I don't remember it off the top of my head. So please keep that in mind. It has obviously previously been mentioned about the benefits of pickleball, so I'm not going to bring that up again. I don't think anyone's debating that. The other thing I would also mention too is that we are a group that encourages all ages to participate. Someone also mentioned previously that the rate of pickleball players is going up dramatically. Please do not convert them to tennis courts, although we did see more people playing tennis because of the pandemic. Tennis has actually gone down 22% in the last 2 decades. So I don't think that would be a good use of tax dollars money to change those over to tennis courts. So I would discourage you to do that. I'm happy to send you my source if you're interested in that, but tennis is not a growing sport unlike pickleball. In conclusion, I think Patton Township, the Council of Government, Center Region Parks and Recreation should be happy that they were visionaries in putting these pickleball courts in. It's my understanding they are the only ones in any of the townships or the borough of State College. I think they should be applauded for that. I do understand that the noise needs to be discussed. I don't know what the solution is, but removing the pickleball courts and either completely removing them or replacing them with tennis courts is not a good use of taxpayers' money. And as a resident of Patton Township, I hope it doesn't come to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So now I'm going to go to the raise hands people, and I remember mentioning Teresa Vesio before, so I'm going to start with her, and then next will be Dana Wilcox, and next will be someone named Pappy, and after that, Audrey Lynn, I can't read your last name. So Teresa Vesio, go ahead, you have the floor.
Hi, thank you. I'm Terry Vesho. I also have raised my kids going to this park and live in the area, grew up in Park Forest, am both a neighbor and play pickleball. And I just wanted to make a couple comments and perhaps put out a request to be considered with our neighbors. I live in between Kim Beatty and Kate Mount. So not as close as Kate and not as far as Kim Beatty. And I just want to bring up a couple points. The whole time I was raising my children who went to school with Kate Mount's kids, Green Hollow Park was seriously underused park. And when our kids were younger, I played tennis there all the time. You couldn't bike on the tennis courts because they were being used. Over time, kids started to bike on the tennis courts as they were seriously underused. I'm really grateful that our community put taxpayer dollars into upkeep and fixing up the park. Thank you. I would also like to just point out a couple of things. I'd like to kind of keep us from going to straw man arguments of pickleballers versus the neighbors like someone else raised. This is a neighborhood park and several people in the neighborhood use the park. If it is so disturbing to our neighbors that it's insufferable, I would like to deal with that in some way and deal with it. But my request to the board is, since we spent $82,000 in taxpayer dollars, since several community members and Park Forest members who are paying those taxes use the pickleball courts, and since pickleball is a sport that keeps people active well above the ages of tennis players, can we at least wait until the Y is open and we're past the pandemic to see what to assess the magnitude of the problem? And I'm not in any way disrespecting my neighbors. When Kate says it's a problem, it's a problem. When Garcia say it's a problem, it's a problem. I understand that, but it seems a little bit weird to start pulling down resources that we put $82,000 into at the end of a pandemic wherein everybody was seriously using parks in a way I haven't seen them used the whole time I've lived here, and before these other resources are open. So my question to my neighbors and the board is, can we at least wait until we return to a point of normal to figure out if we should be pulling out resources we spent $82,000 on and that are used by a great number of people in the community, in the neighborhood? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, I got a request from Mr. Friedlander, so I put you on the wait list here, so you'll be number 5. Next, we're going to go to Dana Wilcox. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for letting me have a moment to talk. I recently just joined this group. My husband and I have lived in State College for 4 years. We're in our 30s. We are able to walk to the park. It's about a 10 to 15 minute walk. To us, this has been a huge blessing. We feel like we didn't know anyone in State College. If you're in your 30s and you don't have kids, it is impossible to make social circles here. So to us, this has been, it's just wonderful. I mean, I've met friends, I've have a, more of a social interaction, meeting people. So I really enjoy playing Hollow. I'm sorry, of course, my dog just heard something outside. So I really hope that the courts are not taken down. And again, some of the courts, I heard that maybe some people want to take 2 courts down or 4 courts or whatever it is. I think that would just kind of result in longer play because people might hang around longer to play longer as opposed to like I play on my lunch break. So if there's just 2 instead of 4, I mean, I won't get to play. And that's the same reason other people won't get to play. I think that, that's a huge consideration is that as a Patton Township member, I did want, to use recreation facilities where I live and where I pay taxes. And I also think that, Teresa said a lot of what I was going to say, but so thank you, Teresa. But, also like I work for Penn State, I'll go back in August. A lot of people are going to go back to work in August. So the lunch break people like me won't be playing during the day. They also, I would love to still be able to play from 5 to 7 p.m. That's the only time I'll be able to play every day. So I sincerely hope that that's not taken away, that there's less courts. The only other topic, I live across from a school, so I fully understand parking and loudness, and I get all of that. Kind of the same reason you can't ride your skateboard at the school, or I can't take my dog over there and play in the yard. That's kind of the same reason you can't, ride your bike on an $82,000 court. It causes damage like my dog would. So, and so because of that, I take my dog somewhere where she is allowed to run free. So I think, as a community, the best way we can build stronger bonds is making kind of like different ways that we all can fit in. So I'm, that's all I kind of had to say, but I appreciate being able to say it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Now, Drew, I saw your note. Your hand was up at one time and then it was lowered. So that's why I bypassed you, but I already announced the order. So a person named Pappy, would you please identify yourself?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think it's pretty obvious that originally my granddaughter must have set up my Zoom. So I might be Pappy forever, but I'm Bo Barbaro, local ambassador, someone who tries to promote the sport of pickleball in our area. And I really just want to correct one misconception. So this idea that we recruit from across the country to come to what is a beautiful park, but a little tiny forecourt park, and it's just wrong. It's been explained a number of times, but I thought one more track. So the USA Pickleball Association, the national governing body, they have a neat feature called Places to Play. So if I happen to be traveling, let's say to Baltimore, I could make a contact there and that person would tell me where's a good place for me to play while I'm visiting. And that's what we have. Occasionally, we will have people who contact me, and depending on their level of play, we might direct them to Burnell Park or to the Y or to Green Hollow to have some matches. A few years ago, we had a very neat couple from South Dakota, and they simply got in their RV and they were traveling the country playing at different venues. And we met them and they played one afternoon, 3 games with us, and they were off to the next town. So I have empathy for both sides of the argument, but I just hate to see misconceptions being thrown in to bolster an argument. So Green Hollow is not going to be a destination for pickleball players. There won't be Airbnbs popping up. VRBO will not support them. And in fact, we couldn't really have a tournament because it is so small. It's wonderful to have it. It's beautiful, but that's just, I had to clear that up one more time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Audrey Lynn is next, and then Drew after that. Go ahead, Audrey.
Hi, yes, good evening, and thank you for taking me for the comments this evening. I just want to quickly reiterate and agree with so many of my neighbors around, or that have spoken already tonight, in regards to, please don't spend any more money. I employ this board. You have studies. You can go out and Google studies that other neighborhoods and townships and states and communities have put together. $84,000 is the going number that keeps being reiterated, that was spent on resurfacing and painting and providing space for the pickleball courts. As a taxpayer, I do not know how I can support, I don't want to support you having to go out and get documentation and studies for that information that is available. We know pickleball is a very loud sport. The people that live around the park have been very communicative. They have voiced their concern, their concerns and their annoyance for the fact that this is there. I just need to get my thoughts here put together because I've been scribbling notes as other people have been giving public comment. I also feel, I also would like to ask this board to make a decision once and for all. This has been a number of weeks that it's been one side pitted against the other, against parking, against the noise. Again, I also like to say that pickleball was given this opportunity at Green Hollow Park over a year ago when the YMCA's space was closed due to COVID. Pickleball has been given the opportunity by this Board of Supervisors to play for over a year, as residents have been raising concerns and questions about the noise and about the consistency and the fact that it's 7 days a week. I'm very happy that the time has been restricted. The gift of time back in the morning has been wonderful. I know my neighbors have mentioned this, but at the same time, I support the taking of the pickleball court nets down because you're asking for an entire summer. You've already been given a year. These are things and thoughts to be looked upon as pros and cons. I would really like, again, the money is a concern as a taxpayer. The fact that this is going on as long as it has, as the township, who are you supporting? The residents that live around this park, or the players that are coming in from outside the community who really would like a space? I'm glad that you are looking at the documentation that's also being provided and you're trying to identify a park that fits the guidelines. And that's all I have to say. I give my time back.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. So next is Drew. Drew Von Tisch, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to speak. In order to maybe remove some of the divisions that have occurred. I think it would really be helpful if the pickleball community was not referred to as outsiders or special interests and things like that. We are local. We have people from Sierra. We have people from Park Forest, from Patton Township. We are neighbors to that court. And we've also heard from neighbors who don't play pickleball that like the fact that Park Forest is being utilized again. When we started playing there, it was literally empty every time we went. So I know it, I understand the viewpoint of the locals. I truly do. We've been playing there almost 2 years actually, and I know that gives them no comfort. They would like us to be gone in 2 days, if not 2 minutes. But taking the nets down at this point on the 16th of June, when we're about 2 weeks away from one of the major improvements, is just shows an impatience and a knee-jerk reaction. So we have 4 things in the works that can relieve the situation. So parking improvements, potentially what we can learn from a sound study. If we don't measure this, how can we truly say it's improved or not improved? Finding new courts elsewhere, I think everybody agrees, is key to the solution. And I just want to talk briefly about the YMCA. We're going to open, we hope, before the end of June, if not by July 1st. So why would we make a decision when some relief is literally around the corner? We've been there 2 years. I would ask for some patience to see what happens in the next few weeks. The Y is actually going to be offering promotions for people who are not members. And by the way, the Y is going to be open for pickleball from sunrise to sunset. And we can do that. And we know that it's 6:30 in the morning. There'll be players out there. It will not interfere with the local neighborhood. They'll be out there till 9 or 9:30 at night when the sun is shining. So for those of you who are thinking of joining, that's another reason. The Y is also offering promotions to get people to join. And they have an open door policy to help people who can't afford to go to the Y to afford to play there. I just want to point out with Green Hollow, since the YMCA courts are not the be all and end all of this problem, that's 5 courts for an area of over 150,000 people. We are so far behind the rest of the world when it comes to the availability of this sport, which is why we're advocating for it. So Green Hollow, even after the Y opens, is going to continue to be the lifeline, the bridge that will enable people to keep playing, including those who live in Patton Township and in Park Forest, on Sierra, on Park Forest Avenue, who want to come to the courts and play. And as an ambassador, I'm advocating for those people and that we don't make a knee-jerk reaction and just pull down the nets. Regarding tennis, if you go on the Center Region Parks and Rec website, you'll find what I found. There are at least 30 tennis courts within a 5-mile radius of State College. So adding tennis there, first, is not a necessity, and it's really a punitive action to take away pickleball from pickleball players. We need those courts. We need to measure this problem before we can truly say we've made some progress. I know our constituents, I know our players. Most of them are going to go to the Y, but please don't take my word for it. Let's measure the impact on Green Hollow after the Y courts open and make an appropriate decision based on fact and take some of the emotion out of it. Again, we're not outsiders, we're local, we're residents, we're people who appreciate having parks like Green Hollow and want to continue playing there in the future. I would hope that we can please show some resolve to see this through and work on some of the solutions before we make any decisions. So with that, I appreciate the time and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Yes, thank you. Next, I see Wayne Wall.
We had
Go
Alan
ahead.
Friedlander on deck next, I think.
Who?
Alan Friedlander.
Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding me. Wayne, you'll be second. Alan, go ahead. You have the floor. Alan Friedlander.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Alan Friedlander. I've lived in the house at 1912 Park Forest Avenue for 17 years. And I'm going to try to restrict my comments just to testing, the noise testing that we're going to do. My first concern is the cost of the testing. We
I'm not aware. I'm on the pickleball advisory committee as well. And I'm not aware of what that test is costing. Also, I'm a little worried about the accuracy of the testings for a few reasons. You know, number one, you really do need the acoustic engineers who are gonna take care of this testing to have some experience and expertise in the noise that pickleball makes. It isn't just the loudness, it's the unique, bothersome frequency and pitch. And so I'm hoping that they will be expert enough to measure accurately. The other thing is, what are we going to do when we know that it's a nuisance to neighboring houses? Are we going to build the 12-foot fences, the 12-foot fence around the Park Forest Avenue side, and then apply the acoustic fence that will absorb and maybe bounce off some of the noise somewhere else? Well, if we do, are we going to make a much of an improvement? My reading is that a lot of times the acoustic fence works in 10 to 20% of the times. 10 to 20% reduction of noise. And I don't know if we're going to achieve that much, because in this Green Hollow Park, number one, it's a hollow, which magnifies noise. Number two, our houses are up a hill from the courts, which I'm not sure the fence is going to be able to take care of. And number three, the courts were put in the wrong orientation. So it's not going to surprise anybody if you spend $30,000 to $35,000 on fencing and it doesn't take care of the problem. So I guess that there are those that might say, well, we're going to test the noise and we might be pleasantly surprised that, hey, it's not that noisy. But I think that the problem is that it is that noisy to the neighbors. The neighbors around here are your test. We are the acoustic test. And we've been saying, loud and clear that the ping, ping, ping noise is a real nuisance and a violation of the Patton Township noise ordinance. It's just so constant and continuing, it's really not something that we want to live with. I also worry about the test, because we're going to test tomorrow, I guess, when there is likely to be a full 16 people banging away, at the pickleballs. And then we're going to compare that next month after the YMCA, as we know, is going to decrease the usage by a whole lot. So it's not going to be a surprise that, wow, things are great. We don't have to worry about it anymore. But as we also have discovered, pickleball is becoming more popular. And sooner or later, there's going to be 16 more people banging away, but we're not going to have the comparison, because it's going to be months or years later after the final test. So to me, we can save the money on the test. We're telling you it's too loud. The other thing that concerns me a little bit is there are definitely people in the neighborhood, some of which walk, some of which drive, that use the pickleball courts. But I'd be surprised if there weren't a significant number of them that would say, you know what, if we're driving our neighbors crazy, we'll drive down to the Y, or we'll drive down to Burnell Park and use the pickleball courts there. Why should we, cause a nuisance? So that's really all I have. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Mr. Wayne Wall, you have the floor now.
Hey, thanks, Dan. I want to thank the committee again for letting me speak. The thing I want to talk about is the sound silencing issue. we had a presentation last meeting about sound silencing and the effects, and we've had discussions here about how effective it will be, 10 to 20%. I want to propose to the board that none of those have been subject matter experts. None of those have been acoustic engineers that can do the study properly and advise the board properly. So, well, what's my expertise? I have no expertise in sound silencing. Well, actually, I do. I have been a submarine officer in the United States Navy for over 33 years and still going. We live by sound silencing. We live by keeping the noise down. And I can tell you, there's no question that we can mitigate the sound. The question will be cost, and the question will be what is that level of mitigation that's required to make the residents happy. But I can guarantee the board that we can mitigate the sound 100%. I can keep a $2 billion submarine quiet while in enemy territory. I can keep a pickleball court quiet. So I want to assure the board that 100% there is a mitigation that is possible. But to find out what that is, we require the sound study. We require the equipment to be brought in. We require the experts to bring in the sound equipment, measure the sound, tell us what the mitigation is and what level would be required to mitigate it to a level that's acceptable to the residents. So we've had numbers thrown out, 10 to 20% reduction. Yeah, well, that's a number. 50% reduction is a number. And I can tell you as a person who has lived sound silencing for the last 33 years, 80% is a possibility. It's just a cost. And I can also tell you that you've spent $80,000 or more on the courts, and you're going to spend at least 30 to 40,000 more on a study and mitigation, while you're also looking at spending 100 to 200,000 more on other courts. I think a sound study is a very reasonable expectation. And also we can then look at the cost of the reasonable mitigation. And by reasonable mitigation, remember that the noise ordinance does say that unreasonable noise is defined as something which is a person of normal sensitivities and reasonable expectations. So, the reasonable sensitivities, we have to figure out what is required to get the noise mitigated to that level. What is reasonable sensitivities? I don't know. I haven't defined that. No one here has discussed what reasonable sensitivities are and what that level is. So I think that, yes, it is up to the board to decide what is reasonable and then what it would cost to get to that reasonable level. Yes, that's what is required of a sound study. So once again, I want to thank the board for letting me speak, and I want to assure you that 100% a sound study is a reasonable solution and a reasonable course of action for this event. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me give a warning to any other people who are thinking about speaking. You need to raise your hand or let me know via the chat feature now. Otherwise, I will be closing the public comments section. So I'll wait for a few seconds here. Anybody else raises their hand or sends me a chat? I don't see any. Okay, I am now closing the public comment section on this topic. So next, Board of Supervisors. Board of Supervisors, it is now up to you to, react, make your suggestions, comments. Where do we go from here? Pam Rob, go ahead.
I think we made our suggestion after hearing all the residents and the pickleball players. Before we make any suggestion, I still say we should meet with our solicitor. There are some things that were brought up, and we need to talk to our solicitor before making any kind of decision. Along with some of the suggestions that were made, we need to talk about it as a board. So I'm looking forward to meeting with the solicitor as soon as possible so we can be transparent to both sides on this issue. And as before we move forward on this. Thank you.
Okay. Anita?
I agree with Supervisor Rob. And also in the meeting with the solicitor, hopefully Supervisor Abrams would be present. I think this is something that all 5 supervisors need to be present for. I hope all of the residents who've taken their time, taken right during their dinner hour tonight, to zoom in and listen and speak. I hope you know that all of us on the board are listening very carefully. I hear I've been taking notes while folks have been speaking of your concerns, of the residents who are near the park, of residents who are walking to the park. I was especially moved by Dana Wilcox's comments about combining the weight, because also Penn State will be having staff return to work, and to wait to see how things are going. In a meeting I was at on a different topic, they were speaking about the impact of pandemics and how pandemics bring change and how it takes time to sort all of that out. I hear the cry of the residents who want the nets taken down right now, but I also hear the plea of other residents who are within walking distance of the park, saying that this is an activity that is good for their health. And I think we should give the pickleball committee, my questions for the pickleball committee would be, I know at some point there was discussion about requiring rackets that are quieter or balls that are quieter. I'm not a pickleball player, so I don't have technical knowledge of the sport, but I would be interested in recommendations. I'm pleased that the pickleball committee has been meeting. And what would you recommend, both in terms of equipment and possible hours going forward? I think right now my position is it's premature to take down nets. I know at the last meeting I suggested taking down 2, and but the board felt that was premature, and especially Supervisor Abrams spoke, and I respect him so much from his years of service. So I support Supervisor Rob. I would not choose to make any decision about the courts tonight.
Okay, thank you. Betsy Whitman?
I would like to second what Supervisor Rob and Tees have said. I would also like to ask our township manager to inquire of the Center Region Parks and Rec agency to do a similar assessment of all the parks in the COG region, similar to the assessment that I believe Susan Wheeler and her group did for Patton Township parks, to see how many parks would fit the placement of a pickleball court using the stipulations that the Patton Township Recreational and Advisory Committee used, that being a certain distance, in particular from houses. So Doug, is that something you can look into, asking the CRPC to do that, get us that information?
We'll forward the request, yes.
Thank you.
Anita, you have additional comment? Go ahead.
Speaking of Center Region Parks and Rec, I would hope it would be clarified, as we've spoken in the past, that any of their courts, tennis courts or others, do not permit bicycle riding or other activities. This is not something that is specific to pickleball courts. This is a Center Region Parks and Recreation policy. And you know, I heard the gentleman wanting to have his kids ride their bicycles in a fenced area, but that's an issue to take up with Center Region Parks and Rec. And there's good reasons why they restrict bicycle riding and other activities on the courts. And also I had a question for Doug. You had mentioned earlier on the traffic study on Sierra Lane at the corner of Cornwall. Does the board need to authorize moving the 40-foot space there to mitigate that immediately? Does that require board action, or will
I can direct that. I can direct Public Works to do that. We'll have to come back to, we actually have to pass an ordinance to enact the traffic law. So at some point it'll come back in front of you.
Thank you.
Okay, my sense of the consensus here is that the board doesn't have any specific action to take tonight. We do still have, I think, Doug, you still have a scheduled meeting of the advisory group in July, early July, is that correct?
Yeah, I think July 11th or 12th.
Okay, and we will also schedule a exec session with our solicitor to discuss specifically Mr. Garcia's request and other issues, other legal aspects of this whole point. So what's going to happen for the board is that we're actually needing to have this on our agenda for our July meeting. What date is that, Doug, the July meeting of the board?
July 21st.
So the next time we'll be discussing is July 21st. Thank you, everyone, who spoke up, giving us your viewpoints and being courteous and respectful. I'm proud. I'm proud of our community and of our citizens. Now I'm going to call a recess of this meeting. We all need this little break. So 10 minutes. We'll be recessed for 10 minutes. Doug, are you still on?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, we have the board members back. So yes, Betsy? You're just saying you're here, yeah, okay. All right, I will now call a recess over, and we will now resume the meeting of the Patton Township Board of Supervisors here on June 16th, 2021. So the next item on our agenda is the item C, 3C, CATA budget. I believe we have Luana Oliva from CATA here, as well as Mark Parfit, who's the Patton Township representative to the CATA board. So
I think Luana has brought a couple of other staff members along.
Okay. Who's going to start?
I'm going to actually speak, and
Okay.
Mark will jump in if he needs to, and the others are here in case they're the expert people in case we have questions that I can't
Okay,
answer.
great. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I thought what I would first talk about is service plans for next year, as they have changed even since last week. We had our public hearing last week. The board has reviewed the changes that I'm going to talk about and has asked that they be included on the June board agenda for official action. So the way I thought I would approach it is to just start with all of the service restoration that just impacts Patton Township. And then for the rest of the community, I'll just cover the latest changes in the other municipalities rather than everything. So for Patton Township, we will be restoring the A route with 2 trips in the AM and the PM. New since last week is we will also be restoring the G route with 2 trips in the AM and PM. The HM route will be continued with an increased frequency of between 30 and 40 minutes. This route connects with the Bellefonte-Benner Spring Catago zone. The HU will be reinstated with 20-minute frequency during peak hours, so between 7 a.m. until 11 a.m., and again from 3 p.m. until 7 p.m. The in route will be continued at a frequency of a bus every 40 minutes. However, we are going to extend the hours on the in route until 2:30 a.m. on Friday and Saturday nights. The NE route will be reinstated with 20-minute frequency during peak hours. So again, that's 7 a.m. until 11 a.m. and again 3 p.m. until 7 p.m. The V route will be continued at a 40-minute frequency. And again, with this route, we will be extending the hours until 2:30 a.m. on Friday and Saturday night. The VE route will be reinstated with 20-minute frequencies during those peak hours I mentioned earlier. The W route will continue with a 20-minute frequency, and the hours will be extended until 2:30 a.m. on Friday and Saturday night. Sunday service will resume with hourly frequency. CATA will close the week between Christmas and New Year's Day. However, CATA ride services will continue during that period. The board will be adopting a new paratransit service policy where the CATA ride service will operate in the Catago zones, being piloted in Bellefonte, Benner, Spring, and Harris Townships. So this would mean that those who are eligible for CATA ride services in Patton can also use the CATA ride services to access the communities that are served by Catago. So that's within Patton. So other changes that we are also making in the system is that the F and S routes will resume with 2 a.m. and 2 p.m. trips. The P route will remain in Harris Township while a Catago pilot is being tested and will be reevaluated during the pilot period. Frequency in Harris Township for the P bus will be every 80 minutes. Then the P route from Scenery Park area on in, that frequency will increase to every 30 minutes to help people make connections. Routing for a commuter style route with a 2 a.m. trip, 2 p.m. trip is still being investigated in the Bellefonte, Benner, and Spring area. We need to take some of the demand off of the Catago services during peak commuter times. So these new changes will be added to the CATA final budget for the board's approval at its June meeting. Estimates are that these changes will cost between 800,000 and $1 million in additional costs to the budget. I was also asked to talk about stimulus dollars and how CATA is using those dollars, so I can move into that next, and then I'm sure we'll have time for questions after that then. So last spring, CATA lost 97% of its ridership overnight. So literally the pandemic hit and we were down to just about 3% of our typical ridership. 15 months later, we still have only regained 12% of our ridership, of our pre-COVID ridership. University towns and commuter rail systems have been the hardest hit by the pandemic and continue to see large ridership losses. For instance, many urban systems have regained about 60 to 75% of their ridership at this point. So financially, CATA has further impact from the fact that before the pandemic, our contracts and fare box revenue covered about 46% of our operating costs. So right now, we're still only at about 10% of our pre-COVID income coming in from our fare box. So it's been a big financial hit. Without those early stimulus funds, we likely would have closed our doors last year. CATA has been notified that we have funds allocated through 3 different stimulus bills. The total of those funds is $22,924,957. And as of today, we've received the first 9.5 million of that. So this may sound like a lot, but many people don't realize that CATA's annual operating budget is near 20 million. And we do not expect to see any additional special funds. We've also been, this year, our funding, so when I say this year, the year that will start on July 1st, our state funds were held flat for the first time in a very long time. And we are being told to expect a 2% reduction in our state funding next year. So because of all of this that I've been talking about, the staff and board chose to reduce services over the last 15 months. At some, early on with the mitigation, it just didn't make any sense for us to be running full service. And we've been just sort of slowly putting things back in. If you remember last fall, we heard everything was going to be back to normal. We put in tons of service. We tried to do social distancing, and that just didn't happen. And then we had to turn around then and cut the service again and lay people off again. So we have been sort of judiciously returning services based on community activity that we're seeing in order to make the funds that we are going to receive last longer. We believe that this ridership and funding disruption could last another 2 years, according to what our industry is predicting. So since these last changes were considered last week, we are in the process of updating our long-term fiscal charts. Over the next year to 2 years, we will be further studying our routes post-COVID. Some of the things that we will be watching for is the impact of more people working from home. We still are not sure what percentage of classes will actually be held in person, or a portion of classes that might not be held in person, which also impacts our ridership. And we will also be looking at changes to our revenue models. These kind of changes don't happen quickly. And so for the long-term viability of the agency and its services, we've chosen to put service back where it makes sense while we work through all of this. Before I turn this back over for questions, Mark Parfit, your appointee to the CATA board, is also here. And I would like to allow him the opportunity to speak if I missed something.
No, thanks, Luana. You covered it pretty well. The only thing I was going to add to just kind of reinforce that the board understands is a lot of our subsidy is based on ridership. And so the CATA board, when we found we were going to get that stimulus money, because I know that's what some of your questions are about, we had to face, do we spend that now and try to maintain our normal level of service, even though the ridership may not be there? or do we try to save some of that because we know that based on ridership, our subsidy in the future years may not be, what we're accustomed to. And initially, a couple weeks ago, when we put out the proposal for the fall service, there were a lot more cuts. At the very beginning, even the A was cut, the G was temporarily suspended, and the board within the last week did decide to put back in a lot of that service based on feedback from the public hearings that were held to try to maintain that. Now, to be clear, what that does is that really puts a stress on CATA's funding probably next year and the year after. And if we don't get ridership back the way that the university is telling us they expect it to be, the way that other stakeholders around town are telling us that they expect ridership to come back to CATA, we will probably be back in a year from now, asking you to help us make some even more difficult decisions. So we are using our best guess to try to navigate how to use these funds and how to move forward.
I have to unmute myself, sorry. Thank you, Luana and Mark, very much for your report. Open this to the Board of Supervisors for questions or comments. Betsy Whitman, go ahead.
Yes. First of all, thank you. First of all, thank you for that budget. I know, well, I've never put one together, but I've stumbled through many a budget and it was phenomenal. And secondly, thank you for coming to the board tonight and making that presentation. I was the one who actually had asked the question to talk about that balance between the 22 million that came in and the number of rides that were cut. And I understand there's been an offer from the county transportation to supplement some of CATA's rides. But mostly I want to compliment you on your ability to listen and to incorporate the needs, hear those needs, incorporate those needs into the budget. As somebody who now chairs the COG Committee on Climate Action and Sustainability, of course, transportation, while it's only about 20% of our greenhouse gas source, and so we, that's a 20% opportunity that we could reduce the greenhouse gas by making more public transit and less individual transit. I understand it doesn't seem like much, but when you're, of course, faced with bringing down that greenhouse gas number, you're looking for every unit of that, as I'm sure you are in looking at your CATA budget and looking for every dollar and every rider that you can. I have a question for you that to help us either as supervisors or as just citizens in the community. What increases ridership? I knew if you knew the answer to that, you wouldn't be coming before us and we wouldn't have any problems. But it does in many ways seem like a bootstrapping. If you build affordable housing, maybe, or workforce housing, maybe they will come because they'll need the rides. But then how do you justify location of affordable housing, workforce housing in one area if you don't have the public transit?
The interesting thing is that prior to the pandemic, we had the opposite problem. The community has been growing at such a rate that our subsidies are not keeping up. We didn't have enough buses to meet the needs, so we were building these big looping routes. We didn't, enough drivers. We didn't have enough drivers to do this as well. So, what a difference 15 months makes. Because we would have, particularly in Patton, we would have crush loads on many of our buses, and we were trying to find ways to rework some of the routing. But one of the biggest things that we needed to do that was, additional buses. And right now, I don't know how long that'll last because we are putting back a lot of the service. But we don't think at the beginning, one of the things that we end up doing, particularly like in the Patton and State College area, is on some of the routes in the student corridors, we're actually platooning. We started during the pandemic, we got articulated buses so that we could put more people, pick up more people. Of course, timing is everything. Our articulated buses came in during the pandemic. So we've gone from that. We have concerns just because we don't know how some of these things that have, I think there's probably this will be the third time that it'll probably been said tonight that the pandemics tend to change things. So we're really in an unknown. I mean, CATA has had data, excellent data. It's almost too much data, and we're always sort of wading through this ocean of data. But all of that data before 15 months ago, we're wondering how effective is it going to be. We can't use the data from the last 15 months because we've been shut down, and we know that the university is a big piece of it. So it's going to be interesting to see how we come out of this and whether the ridership, how quickly it'll come back. We're projecting, a certain level of growth, but then we think that it might slow again, and we may have take us a while then to actually get back up where we were. Obviously, we'll be doing marketing. There, I think too, you talked a little bit about affordable housing and that kind of stuff, and I am definitely seeing more cohesive and coordinated planning in this community. As far as, the committees that I'm, setting on as an information source. So I think that is helpful. One of the reasons, to talk about a different community, one of the reasons that during this pandemic, we decided to try the pilot of CATA Go in Harris is because we were actually interacting with passengers out there and realizing, they don't have sidewalks. They don't have kind of pedestrian amenities that are needed. And they were walking down the berms and standing on the berms of state roads. So it's a major barrier for folks to get to transit service if there's no sidewalks and those kind of things. A lot of coordination. We're looking, there will be things that we'll be looking at going forward, things called like micro mobility, which includes bikes, and how do we tie transit services, the core transit services, to all of these other ways to get to the bus in some areas where it's harder. So that's a very wide thing. Go ahead, Mark, sorry.
Oh, that's okay, sorry. Betsy, I'll jump in with a couple of thoughts on my end. I think to address your bigger issue, what do we do to get more people to ride? And my view as just one board member is our biggest competition, if you will, in this community is that our residents they're willing to pay for convenience, and they have the luxury of being able to pay for convenience. And we see that with the number of people who will use Uber and Lyft to go to work on a regular basis, or drive and pay to park whatever it costs to park. And so we at CATA, we have to work on convenience, I think, and that's something I've been trying to stress in our meetings. I've learned a lot from the CATA staff, and I've also tried to do my own research and try to figure out why public transit works so well in some communities and why it doesn't. And one, sometimes we have two good things that compete with each other. One thing I found was that the more communities do to make themselves more bicycle friendly, that shares an audience with public transit. So obviously, we've done a great job of making this more accessible to people to ride their bike to work, and that's a great thing. The trade-off might be those may have been public transit riders, things like that. So the more we can do stuff like Luan is talking about, integrating public transit with bikes, for example, where maybe you ride and then you take the second half if you have to, or whatever. We're really exploring a lot of big picture topics, and hopefully in the future we'll be back to share those with you. And as always, if you have any ideas, feel free to share them with us, because we do need to get more people on the public transit grid.
For sure. It's not my wheelhouse, public transit, and I'm so it's complex. So I'm glad it is your wheelhouse. You're working on it. And I'm fascinated by the competition essentially between bike riders and transit riders. Never thought of it that way. but yeah, I bet you anything.
Still beats the car with one person in it, right?
Right. Yeah. Yep. Thank
Anything?
you. Yeah.
Okay. Anita or Pam, do either of you have any questions or comments?
Of course.
Go ahead, Pam.
I guess it's my turn. You're a cheerleader. I'm one of your riders. Let me first say thank you. During COVID, I knew it was a stretch. I can't even begin to thank you and your staff, the bus drivers, how safe you made us feel riding. The ridership, I understood, was down because of the fear. But once we got over that, we're coming over the hump. I know trying to get back to the norm, in which it won't be the norm. But hopefully, through working together, getting out the word that you guys are continually supporting your community by continually having the ride there for us. I thank you for that. I can't even begin to tell you what it was like for me to get out and get on the bus that you still had running to go downtown from Park Forest. And our bus drivers continually to be courteous and conscious of keeping all their riders safe. My concern is now the people that you laid off. Where are we at there in getting them back on track, getting their jobs back? How can we help?
I'm not sure I can give you an answer on that yet, because this last round of changes we're still working through. So it'll, we have the concepts, and then we have to break it into routes and hours and then bids, and that's all going to help us figure out where we are on that. So unfortunately, I don't have an answer yet for you on that one.
No problem, but thank you again for listening to our residents here in Park Forest and putting some of the buses back en route that our residents truly needed. Hopefully with the college researching their students coming back, we hope that I also sit on the TLU Transportation Land Use Committee, that, working with the college, that we can get our students and just the staff who use CATA back on track. Looking forward to even myself getting back on, on a regular basis. Thank you. I just don't know how we can help you to get that word out, and to truly appreciate what you do. I'm kind of a little upset that I can't make your board meetings, because it's usually the same time we have our general forum meeting. So, hopefully we can continue to talk to our other colleagues in the other municipalities, to help out. And with the new developments that are coming in, we have the new housing developments that are coming in to get the word out that, CATA is available for you. And any of our developments coming in, we hope that we can continue to get that word out about CATA. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pam, one thing where we probably will be coming back to you and asking for your support is we're reviewing the way we fund the student apartment program. And I think we will expect some pushback from some of those apartment businesses, and we're going to be asking the municipalities to really help us stress how we have to update that program, and we'll probably be seeking your support then too.
You have it.
Thank you.
Anita, did you have any questions or comments?
No, I support
Okay.
the other supervisors have said, and add my thanks. Thank you,
Okay.
Kat.
I have a kind of a picky little budget question, but let me open this up for public comments. Anybody here attending this session wish to ask a question or make a comment about the CATA report here? Please use your raise hand feature or turn on your video and wave at me. Okay, I don't see any hands raised nor people waving at me. Okay, my little picky question. I was the one who initiated the question about your stimulus funds because your budget proposal didn't say anything other than you were going to be receiving stimulus funds from 3 different legislative acts. I printed out your budget proposal, and then you turn that over and look at the side that says federal subsidies over here on the top. And I looked at those totals, and it didn't appear to me that stimulus funds were even included anywhere in its projected current or projected federal subsidy. So I was wondering how your finance director is handling the stimulus funds. Are they just being held separately until you can plug them into where they're needed, or what's happening?
He's actually on the call tonight. I asked him to be here in case you had questions about the budget, and he can explain how we have to show those dollars. Bruce, are you still with us?
I am, ma'am. Good evening. First of all, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, we
Good,
can,
great.
Bruce.
I sometimes have a little problem with the speakers on my computer. I am Bruce Donovan. I'm the Director of Finance. The way our federal subsidies work is we look at all of our subsidies that we're getting in, our local, our state, and our federal. Federal subsidies are a reimbursable subsidy. We expend the cash funds that CATA has on hand, and then each month we determine what the federal subsidy amount we need is to balance our financials for that month. So the federal subsidies you're seeing in our budget are our estimate on the amount of federal subsidies we are going to need for the upcoming fiscal year, combined with our state operating assistance and also our local match that the member municipalities and our contracted municipalities provide. So it's a matter of we have to use our local match by Commonwealth law. We're required to expend 100% of it every year. Then we look to our state subsidies, and we look at our federal subsidies. With the federal subsidies, especially the 3 different stimulus packages, we have a certain number of years to use those funds once they are appropriated and provided to us. The other thing that we have to look at is, while yes, we have been appropriated the money and allocated the funds from the Federal Transit Administration, currently the CARES Act funding, the initial stimulus package, is the only award that has been approved by Federal Transit Administration. The other two stimulus allocations we've applied for. They are in review at FTA headquarters. So while we have the allocation, it's a cash flow issue. We don't actually have access to those funds yet. We will more than likely over the next couple of months, those award applications will be approved and we'll have access to them. But again, what we try to do is balance what we know our cash flow is going to be, because with the federal government, unlike the state, we expend the funds, and then we request reimbursement.
Okay.
So it's not cash in the bank.
Sure. No, that, I understand. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, if it's reimbursements, you really, you can't put that in your projected budget because you don't know what your expenses, well, you can project your expenses, but you can't really predict your fare. Well, you try. Anyway, no, I understand what's happening here. You know, you're actually not getting the funds dispersed and then you put it in the bank and save it until you need it. Actually, the government hangs on to it until you ask for it after the fact. So that makes a lot of sense. Thank you very much, Bruce, for your explanation. Any other questions or comments about the CATA presentation? Okay, thanks very much, Luana, Mark, and
Thank you.
and Bruce.
Have a
So
good
we're,
evening.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
thank you. All right, we're going to move on. Next, item 3D, Act 537 Facilities Plan Update. So who's going to make this presentation, Doug?
I will make a brief introduction and then turn it back to you. University Area Joint Authority, which provides our public sanitary sewer service, has proposed a plant effluent ozone disinfection project. The Department of Environmental Protection requires that the township and all the other member townships adopt plan updates for our sewage facility plans. We call that an Act 537 plan. And to make these updates to the plan, the township's required to hold a public hearing. So I would recommend that the chair open the public hearing on this proposed special study and take public comments. Once we've received public comments, the board could consider action on the resolution that was included with the agenda materials.
Okay, I will now open the public hearing for the proposed special study, which has been advertised for this meeting. So the hearing is now open. So Corey, are you here on behalf of this? Is there anything you want to add to what Doug said?
No, the CRPA completely supports this plan. It's basically just plant improvements. They're changing their UV disinfection system over to ozone disinfection, which will actually provide more degradation to the emerging contaminants that will be expelled with the wastewater.
Okay, thanks. Now, any other questions or comments during this public hearing, especially from the public? That's what I'm looking for. Anybody wish to raise their hand or turn on your video and wave at me if you wanted to speak? Okay, seeing none, I will now close the public hearing for this proposed special study. And now the board discussion, questions. Any members of the board have anything they want to ask or comment on? Okay, seeing none, I will entertain a motion for the board to approve resolution number 2021-016, a resolution of Patton Township adopting the Act 537 Sewerage Facilities Plan Update.
So moved. I didn't raise my, sorry, Anita. I didn't raise my little yellow hand.
Well, I wasn't even looking, I was reading. So,
Sorry about that.
So moved by Betsy, seconded by Anita. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand and say aye.
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 All four of us said yay, and so the motion carries. Thank you very much, Corey.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Okay. All right, moving on, item number 4A, monthly report of the Chief of Police. Chief Jolly.
All right, thank you very much. A copy of the May 2021 Public Safety Report was included in your materials. You'll see that we had 123 traffic stops, wrote 24 citations, wrote 6 parking tickets, handled 13 criminal arrests, and our bike patrol logged 49 miles, did 86 business checks, handled 2 incidents. One of those was a public relations, community relations with a bike rodeo, and they did 2 vacation home checks. Some of the department notes that we had: as a result of a home search by state parole, a 33-year-old male and a 32-year-old female were charged by our agency with drug offenses. They were found to be in possession of marijuana, fentanyl, and steroids. A 28-year-old male was arrested for harassment and criminal mischief. The male and his girlfriend had gotten into an argument, and he had made some threatening remarks and damaged property that belonged to her. I talked a little bit about this in my end of the year report, so I'm very happy to report this next department note. A 29-year-old male was arrested for delivery and possession of, with intent to deliver, cocaine, marijuana, heroin, and fentanyl. These charges stem from a grand jury indictment following a year-long investigation by our drug detective here in Patton Township, and also the drug detectives in some other area agencies, including the Attorney General's office. The male was responsible for distributing large amounts of narcotics in the Center County area. This arrest disrupted a major pipeline of narcotics trafficking from Philadelphia to the State College area, and we are expecting some more arrests as the investigation continues. But I'm very happy to be able to publicly now discuss this, as the individual has been arrested. One individual was arrested for driving under the influence, and our officers served 5 warrants of the 9 that they attempted, and they conducted 15 vacation home checks. Our officers did use force during one incident in May. Our officers responded to a possible drug overdose where the patient was unresponsive. Officers administered 3 doses of Narcan to the individual and performed rescue breathing, which revived the patient. EMS personnel arrived on scene and took over treatment of that patient. And as officers and EMS were attempting to walk the patient out of his residence, the patient became combative with the officers. They had to use force to secure the patient's hands and arms behind his back. The force consisted of just control compliance techniques involving officers' hands. The patient was escorted to the ambulance to be transported to the hospital for further care without any further incident, and there were no injuries to the officers or to the patient. For community relations, in the month of May, Officer Tuskovich spoke to all 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders at the Park Forest Elementary School about internet safety. Sergeant Shapanko assisted with a bike rodeo that I discussed earlier in the bike patrol report. It was put on by the Boy Scouts of America Troop 375. Sergeant Shapanko gave presentations on bike law and bike safety. He also participated in the virtual bike chat that was hosted by the Recreational Advisory Committee. Officer Tuskovich spoke with an 8th grade social studies class about law enforcement. And then a really great story here: he participated in an escort for a Park Forest Middle School student who was released from the hospital. The student was hospitalized for 2 months with a very serious medical issue. The parents stopped by the school where the student's classmates were actually outside holding signs welcoming him home. And then Officer Tuskovich and the Sheriff's Department provided the family with an escort from the school to their residence. Sergeant Albright participated in a media event promoting buckle up and aggressive driving traffic details that will be occurring across our region throughout this summer. Some training and department activities in April. Our officers attended tactical response team training. Sergeant Stroud, Officer Schaefer, Officer Vardzell, and Officer Staley attended internet investigations and intelligence training. All of our officers received the annual training that we must have for our CPR, first aid, oxygen, AED certifications, and then as well as stop the bleed. And then our officers also received more defensive training, tactics training. And then lastly, we invited Lieutenant William Slayton, the commander of the Pennsylvania State Police's Heritage Affairs Division. He came and provided our officers with training on the history of policing and minority engagement. All the officers' feedback was very good on that class that he provided to us. I attended a task force on policing at Communities of Color meeting, the Patton Township Business Association meeting, and the Center County Chiefs of Police meeting. And then lastly, we mentioned that we got reaccredited this year, but James Adams, who is the Pennsylvania Accreditation Program Coordinator, came to Patton Township Police Department on May 11th and presented us with our certificate of law enforcement accreditation for 2021 through 2023. Next page, we have a photo actually of myself and Sergeant Albright, who's our accreditation manager, receiving that certificate from Mr. Adams. The next photo is the procession leading that student home from his school, who had just been released from the hospital, and also included there's a note from a teacher who's also on our planning commission who helped organize that event. We had a letter and card sent to us from the 911 center, just appreciating the officers' efforts and everything that they do for the community, as middle of May was National Police Week. We did have a performance report for 4 of our officers. Won't read the whole thing, but 4 of our officers were actually involved in a naloxone save for an opioid overdose, provided 3 doses of naloxone to the individual. They slowly revived and regained consciousness, and they were transported and treated at the hospital. But thanks to the quick action by the officers, the individual did survive the opioid overdose. Under the call list for the month of April, you'll see that we had 441 calls for service. That's up from the 418 that we had in April. 68 of those were traffic, which is the most common that we had. 65 were health and safety, EMS assists. Excuse me. And then I also wanted to point out, though, our ordinance enforcement officer had a very busy month in May. We had 26 ordinance violation warnings for high grass and weeds. So just as a reminder to the community and to our residents that it's unlawful for any grass, weeds, vegetation to exceed 6 inches in height. Just also wanted to point out, because we're still having a few of them trickling in here and there. If you looked in the animal section for the calls, we did have 5 bear and bear cub calls. So just want to remind the public that you can always contact the Game Commission. You can contact us as well. We'll come out and try to help with the situation if there's something going on with theirs. But generally, we do refer to the Pennsylvania Game Commission. But just as a reminder, if there are bears in the neighborhood, take down your bird feeders and try to put out your garbage the morning of rather than the night before, so that it doesn't get disturbed by the bears in the neighborhoods. So that completes my report. I do have one other real quick that I wanted to mention something, unless there's any questions for me.
Board members, any comments or questions? Any other public comments or questions? Seeing none, go ahead, Chief, with your.
Okay, Alex, just to steal, I'm going to steal a little bit of Doug's thunder here. Can you pull up 9E, Alex, if you get a chance? This Friday, our agency is actually hosting a free child seat installation and inspection event. It's going to be, again, this Friday, June 18th, from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. We're going to be out at the Grayswoods Elementary School. We partnered with the ABC Children's Center, the daycare that's right out by the school there. But here at Patton Township, we have 3 officers who are certified installers. And we actually have a couple of officers from other area agencies coming out to help us out. So if you know anybody who has a seat that needs to be checked to make sure it's installed properly, or if you need our officers to install a child safety seat for you, we are happy to provide that service. It's going to be first come, first serve. We hope to have a lot of people come out, and we've been trying to get the word out as much as possible. So we look forward to seeing everybody hopefully this Friday from 3 to 7 out at Grayswoods. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, unless someone has comment or question, let's move on. Next item, Public Works, number 5. 5A is a bid award for the 2021 Township Street Overlay Contract. Is it Steve or Doug? Who's going to start this?
Go ahead, Steve.
There, can you see and hear me?
Yep. Go ahead.
Sorry, I had to hit both buttons. Yeah, so the overlay contract, we actually put out, I'll briefly do it. We put out 2 bids on June 10th, or we received bids on June 10th for both the overlay and the Crandall Drive project. The low bidder for the overlay project was Hawbaker with a base bid of $365,882.70, And we actually had an option one, which was to do the driveway aprons. We were considering doing that because those were a high cost item in the last. So the option one included with the base bid was $392, $482.70, and this is below the budgeted amount for road resurfacing this year. The overlays include West Shadow Lane and portions of Toftree Avenue, Cricklewood, and Highland Drive. And we recommend awarding it to Glen O'Habaker for including option one for $392, $482.70.
Thank you, Steve. I'll entertain a motion to award the bid, including option one to Hawbaker.
When you make the motion, if you could just add, authorize the manager to execute the contracts. That would.
And thank you, and authorize the manager to execute the contract. So do we have a motion?
So move, Pam Rob.
We need a second. Who seconds it? Anita T seconds the motion. Any discussion? Seeing none, Betsy, go ahead.
Mwah, thank you. I would just like to point out that the Glen O'Habaker Company Incorporated on April 8th was accused of stealing more than 20 million from thousands of employees dating back to 2015. I understand that the operative word here is accused, and under our court of laws, everyone is assumed not guilty until proven otherwise, and I stand by that. But I feel I have mixed feelings about awarding this to Hawbaker, and but I know I need to put those aside and stand by the court system. So I just wanted to say that for public record.
Okay, any other comments or questions before we vote? Seeing none. Okay, all those in favor of the motion, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, 3, 4, and one against. The motion passes. Thank you. So let's move on to the next item, 5B, bid award for Crandall Drive.
Okay.
Steve, go ahead.
Yep, so this actually completes your neighborhood improvement project for the Homestead Farms, which is you had done back in 2011. So this will actually do both the curbing and the asphalt overlay for Crandall, which is again the last one in the project. We opened bids again on June 10th at a different time, and the low bidder was HRI Incorporated, with their total of $54,683, and we recommend awarding the contract to them and give the manager the approval to execute it.
Okay, Betsy, have your hand raised. Do you make the motion, or you just want to make a comment?
I do make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second, Pam Rob.
Okay, moved and seconded. All discussion on the motion.
I have to give a shout out to the township and let you know that my neighbors will be greatly appreciative of this. So that happens to be in my neighborhood.
They have been calling in. Yes.
They're asking.
Yep, absolutely.
So
Right.
it'll be great
Absolutely.
to give them good news. Thank you, though. They understand.
Yes.
I alerted them to the reason for the delay. No problem.
Oh, there you go.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Let's vote on the motion. All those in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
All in favor, 4 in favor of the motion passes. Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
Moving on, item 6, Planning Commission report. Who's here to make the report?
Sharon Collins is with us. Are you there, Sharon? Sharon may have had, she texted me, she may have had to step away to deal with a situation at home. So I can fill in and Nicole can back me up if I miss anything.
Okay.
Planning Commission met on June 7th. They conditionally approved the Phoenix Academy Performing Arts Plan, the land development plan with the conditional use. That's on your agenda tonight. There was a land development plan, a minor amendment for land development plan for the View Apartments. That's been delayed for another month, so that'll come back to them. There was a replot of 2 parcels in Confer Farm. That's on the board's consent agenda for tonight. The Planning Commission recommend approval of the change to the subdivision land development ordinance to require streetlights at intersections. That's on the board's agenda tonight to potentially schedule a public hearing. The Planning Commission got reports on the board's actions, update on what the Township Housing Task Force has been doing. And then they looked at some requirements or some options for incentivizing or requiring bicycle parking. And Nicole, if you're here, I don't remember exactly where we ended up on that.
With the bicycle parking conversation, the biggest thing that was talked about was whether or not to require it by zoning district or by use. At this point, the Planning Commission is going to look at bicycle parking by use. And at the July meeting, Trish Meek from the CRPA and a transportation planner is going to come talk to us more about different elements to bicycle parking.
Thank you, Nicole.
Sure.
And that's the end of our report.
Any comments or questions from the board or from the public? Seeing none, we'll move on to 6B, the preliminary final land development plan for the Phoenix Academy of Performing Arts of Pennsylvania. Who's going to start this discussion?
I will
Doug
take care of that.
or Nicole? Go ahead.
Thank you. So the site of the plan is at 118 Hawbaker Industrial Drive, located in the Industrial District. The purpose of the plan is to change the existing former wholesale warehouse building into a gymnastics and dance training facility. The building is 15,350 square feet, and it will be 2 floors. The first floor will have offices, a reception area, 4 exercise areas, restrooms, lockers, and a lunch and meeting room. And the second floor will have a preschool training area and an office. The fitness center use was added as a conditional use by the board on May 26th. There was some discussion around the parking requirement. There is no specific requirement for a fitness center, so staff looked at all of the different types of parking that we require in the township and felt that using the gymnasium requirement was the best for this use. And that requirement is 1 parking space for every 3 seats or occupants. The maximum capacity for this facility is listed at 154 occupants, which would mean providing 52 parking spaces, 3 of which would need to be ADA compliant. The applicant is requesting a waiver. They are providing 47 parking spaces, 2 of which would be ADA compliant, and then they have space designated for 5 overflow spaces. As a compromise, and the Planning Commission reviewed this at their meeting, they are willing to accept the applicant's proposal for the parking and feel that it should be monitored and revisited in 2 years' time. And the manager has included some suggested language in the agenda for you for the motion. And I just wanted to point out as well that the parking waiver is for 47 parking spaces. And I do believe Mark Toretti from Pantera is here if you have more questions or would like to see more from him.
Okay. Thank you. Board members, any comments or questions?
Yes.
Yes, Anita, go ahead. You have the
Hi.
floor.
I see in the chat that Planning Commissioner Jim Payne has noted that staff had suggested a 3rd handicapped space and that it could be provided adjacent to the one on the south side. that sounds good to me. And I wonder if that could be included in the approval.
Reaction, Mr. Toretti? Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, several things for that. One, for providing like 40 up to 50 parking spaces, you're only required to have 2 parking spaces that are ADA accessible. But also with ADA requirements, the slope can't be more than 2% in any direction. And when that site was originally built, the grade right after the handicap space on either side changes, especially the one right near the entrance of the building on the west side of it, looking at a plan view, that the grade starts to slope a little bit steeper, and you have to do some repairs to the pavement, cut out some of the pavement section and install and basically flatten it out and then feather it back in. And for what is not really required for 47 spaces, we're just showing 2 at this time because of that. If it was flat already, that wouldn't be any big deal to change it to that, but it isn't.
Thank you. I see again in the chat that the location was suggested along the south side of the building, sharing the handicapped unloading space. Is that the area that you're speaking of?
Yeah, I can share this. If I can share the screen, I can probably talk a little bit better if that's okay.
Sure.
Now, how do you share?
I understand that staff I understand our staff has suggested that.
Yeah.
Mark, I made you a co-host so you can share your screen if you'd like.
Yeah, here we go. I think I found it. Okay, share. And oops, wrong one. Oh no, here it is. No, that didn't work.
No, we can see it, Mark.
Can you see it? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and where they're talking about is this space right here. The main entrance to the building for the participants and students will be right in this area here. And so we do have one handicap space by that entrance. There's another entrance over here, and from the existing parking, there was a handicap space over here, and both of those are graded at the 2% slope in those areas. It's just then the slope change and drop off beyond each of those areas. And so, I mean, that's the reason why it's more of having to then go back and mill out and probably feather in a 2% slope there. And so that's the reason why we are not, proposing that whenever per ADA requirements it's not required.
I would be curious why the staff suggested it. Nicole, could you speak to that?
I believe the rationale was if they're asking for a reduction from the 52 spaces that staff feels should be required, then they should at least be supplying the 3 ADA spaces that the 52 would warrant.
I'm sure, and I think your academy is going to be absolutely wonderful, and the performing arts and the gymnasts that you're engaging. As someone personally who's had a hip replacement and who goes to cheer on other people, I see the possibilities of handicap spaces serving a broad range of people. And I personally would encourage that 3rd space be added as recommended.
Okay, any other comments or questions from the board or the public?
And
Pam, Rob, go ahead.
Mark, what would be the cost to the 3rd handicap space?
Oh,
adding the third handicap space?
I'm just off the top of my head, I'm going to say about $1,000.
Okay. I'm trying to say I'm with my colleague, Anita, on if it's possible to add the third handicap space. 2 seems a little limited, even though it's within the regulation. But every day we're looking at the statistics of handicap, our disabled population, looking to be more active and a part of activities. So I'm looking toward if it is all possible to add the third handicap space.
Okay, thank you, Pam. Jim Payne, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Yes, couple points. They're saying 47 spaces, but at the Planning Commission, they were selling, rude comment, but selling the point that they have 5 overflow spaces for a total of 52 parking spaces. So is it 52, 47? If you count 52, they need 3 handicap spaces. At the very minimum, as far as I'm concerned, the third handicap space should be added to the note to look at the overall parking within the next 2 years. That's it for me.
Okay, thank you. Evan Myers, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. This is not, 2 things. When we discussed this with the Planning Commission, it wasn't my recollection that this was a major point, but it doesn't really matter. We want to provide a good experience for the folks that are being dropped off, for the kids and the adults that are going to be using this facility. We want to provide a good experience for the people that are going to be driving there. We do not in any way, shape, or form want to shortchange people with disabilities whatsoever. And if the need is to add that third space wherever we can do it, that makes sense. We have no objection to doing that whatsoever, and would be perfectly agreeable to add that in tonight as we talk. That's not, we're kind of having a debate over something we don't need to have a debate over. It's okay.
All right, thank you. Mr. Toretti, go ahead.
No, I think my client, Evan Myers, kind of said, what they're looking for, because it basically came down to a cost issue on that end of it versus what's being required. So if he's fine with that, that's fine. I mean, we can look at it. Like I said, the issue was just with the slope and having to adjust the pavement in that area. So that was the only reason we were hesitant about adding that.
If I might, I know I'm having a private discussion with Mark a little bit. We don't need to necessarily put the handicap spot there. Couldn't we put it around the other side where there is the other handicap spot to begin with? And which is near the front anyway.
No, because that one has the ramp on another aisleway. It would have to go in the front there. So
fine.
On the south side of the building, yeah.
We have no problem committing. We'll figure out, and we'll put it there where Mark says to put it. So consider the plan modified as you can envision. That's where the other spot will go.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I've learned, and I'm at the age range where a lot of my friends use canes or walkers, that handicap is a very broad description that facilitates grandparents coming to cheer on their grandkids. And I know you're going to have a big audience turnout to cheer on your many athletes. So thank you very much for that.
Any more comments or questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Suggested motion is conditional approval of the plan pending completion of all items noted on each comment letter provided by staff and the addition of the plan note described above related to the requested parking waiver, which would be provide 47 spaces, including 3 ADA spaces and a designated area for 5 overflow spaces. And then with the condition of monitoring for the next 2 years to revisit this at the end of 2 years to see if there's some additional need for changing this waiver. 2 hands raised, Betsy Whitman and Anita Tees. Betsy?
Well, Dan, you took the words right out of my mouth, so I will so move.
Okay, second?
I second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing no hands raised, let's vote. All in favor of the motion, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
All 4 voted yes, so the motion carries. Thank you very much.
Hey, I just got one quick question.
Sure.
Do we need to officially approve the conditional use also, or is that in the approval?
That's implied in the approval.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I was asking. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay,
Okay, thank you for your time.
sure, you're welcome.
And Mr. Chair, if I could make a very brief comment
Go ahead.
before we leave this topic. I know that both the Planning Commission in Patton Township and this Board of Supervisors has spent a lot of time on this, considered it very carefully. We all appreciate the input that you've given us, the advice, working together. We're happy that this new business will be located in Patton Township in a great spot. I think it's a win, not just for Patton Township, but the entire community. And I just wanted to thank you for your patience, your dedication, and your time.
Thank you, Evan. Yeah, appreciate your compliments. We try our best, and we're doing the best that we can to serve our community. So thanks again. So let's move on. Item 6C, proposed subdivision and land development ordinance to require streetlights at intersections. Who starts this, Nicole or?
I'll take this.
You take it? Okay.
Yeah, if you recall, when we looked at the Barger Field subdivision plan, I believe sometime last year, there was some question about providing a street light at the intersection with the new road and State Route 550. At that point, it was not required by our subdivision land development regulations. So the board had asked the Planning Commission to take a look at it. Planning Commission did review it and has come back with a recommendation that we add the language shown on page 9 of the agenda to our code of Patton Township, requiring new streetlights at new intersections. At this point, if the board concurs with the recommendation from the Planning Commission, they should take action to schedule a public hearing for the proposed change. That could be done at either July 21st or the August 18th meetings.
Okay. Let me just ask for comments or questions first. Board members, any comments or questions? General public, any comments or questions? Seeing none. So what we need to do is a motion to schedule a public hearing for the proposed change to section 153-22 at our July 21st meeting. Is there a motion to that effect? Anita Tees moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Pam Robb, second. Any further comments or discussion? Hearing none, let's vote. All those in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
All 4 voted yes, so the motion carries. So our manager is directed to schedule a public hearing on July 21st. Next item, 6D, proposed Benner Township zoning ordinance. Doug?
Yeah, just arrived, I think, Monday or Tuesday. Benner Township has been looking at revising their zoning ordinance for 2 or 3 years now. There was a prior version we looked at, I think, in late 2019 or 2020. They have made several changes to that. They provided a cover letter that was included with the agenda materials that briefly reviewed those changes. At this point, would recommend that the board receive the draft ordinance and discuss it, and then forward to the Planning Commission for review and comments. It will be back on the board agenda in July then.
Any comments or discussion? Now, Doug, since we just got this, none of us, I assume, I certainly haven't, had a chance to go and review the Benner Township new.
Yeah.
So all we're doing now is just simply acknowledging receipt of this, correct?
And forward it and ask the Planning Commission to review it on your behalf also, and then provide you their comments back for July.
At our July meeting.
Yep.
July 21st. Okay. Does this need a motion or just a consensus?
Consensus is fine.
Any objections from the board? Let's see, Betsy says, okay, thumb up, no, thumb up. Okay, no objections. So the consensus is to go forward this to the Planning Commission for review and report back to the board at our July 21st meeting. Okay, next item, administration 7A, board input on the 2022 to 2026 capital improvement plan. Is this Larry or you?
No, this is me. Just okay. This is the first opportunity, in my first opportunity to ask you and say if there's something you're interested in, either bring it up or start thinking about it. You'll get a couple more opportunities in July and August to make suggestions for capital improvement plans. I provided a copy of last year's. You recall there were a few things that we did have to delay from last year's that got pushed into out years. If you're interested in bringing those back forward, make those suggestions now, as our practice has been with the capital improvement plan. We funnel all the project ideas into Larry. He puts them all into the plan to start with, and we take a look and see what that looks like with the first run. And then we'll make adjustments as needed there after that. Ultimately, the board will be looking at doing a preliminary approval of the capital improvement plan in October. Those 2022 projects that come out of the CIP get into the 2022 budget, and then everything eventually is finally and formally approved at our December meeting. So we get ready for the next year. So at this point, if the board has any ideas or questions or anything, we can have a discussion about those.
Okay, board members, comments, questions, just new ideas you want us to consider? Anita?
Yes. And perhaps this is more to bring up in August when things are a little clearer, but looking at the Recreation Advisory Committee's assessment of possible places for additional pickleball courts in Patton Township at Burnell Road Park, I'm thinking that it should at least be discussed as a potential for a capital and being put on the capital improvement list or into the budget somehow as the year ends. But I realize we're not to this point, but I wanted to recognize the Recreation Advisory Committee's work and their recommendation or their assessment that the place for additional pickleball courts in Patton Township would be those that graded area, which is not yet developed. I think in the discussion that happened earlier, someone implied that there were already courts on that spot, that this would be land that is not yet, does not have any courts on it. But I think we should include potential pickleball courts at Burnell Road Park in the CIP discussion. Also, and the Housing Task Force is not yet to this point, but there are different ideas floating around, and whether there might be something related to workforce affordability and a project in that might come up. But I would know more about that come September.
And remind you, this is for projects for the next 5 years. So not
Yeah.
necessarily something that would start in 2022, but it may be something that we, want to start planning for 2023 or 2024, 25, 25, or multi-year projects.
Okay.
This is the planning tool that we found works best for looking at large, complex, multi-year projects.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Well, as I read the RAC report, that depending on funding, if it couldn't happen in 2022, they would be looking ahead to funding possibilities over the next 5 years. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's money available in 2022. I would think that probably pickleball courts would be one of our priorities. Just a matter of there's probably something else that won't get done in 2022.
Well, thank you. Because I know there was comments made about tax monies being spent on that, and I think it would be because of the service to the township. I would certainly favor that. Thank you.
Betsy? You're on mute right now, Betsy.
Got to do it once tonight. Doug, when will we be having the discussion about the public discussion about the opportunity that the CARES Act funds would allow us as a township?
These are the American Rescue Plan Act.
Thank you,
funds.
American Rescue Plan.
Yeah. We're going to run these two conversations in parallel until probably in October, and then they will come together at that point.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions, suggestions? Okay, Doug, seeing none, I think we can move on. Next item is 8, the consent agenda. Is there anything on the consent agenda that a member of the board wishes to pull and discuss separately? Okay, not seeing anyone wish to do that, so I'll accept a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So move, Pam Robb.
Second, Betsy Whitman.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Everyone voted yes, the motion carries. Next item is 9, manager's report.
I'll run through these things fairly quickly. If you stop me, if you have any questions. A few pieces of correspondence. There was a email correspondence I had with the assessor's office about a parcel in Park Forest that is a stormwater parcel, and I noted back to the assessor's office is concerned about delinquent taxes. They wondered if we were interested in it. My response was the owner mows the grass and someone shovels the sidewalk, so we're okay with the status quo. He understood what I meant. There's no value to the township for us acquiring that parcel. There's also provided you a copy of a memo I'd sent out to ABC members for Patton Township, asking them for their input on American Rescue Plan. I've also reached out to the employees and asked for their their input. This just yesterday, I sent a request out to many of our partner agencies, including COG agencies, CATA, and CNET, asking if they had ideas and input. And then starting next week, we'll start doing outreach to the general public. Included in that some more information from U.S. Treasury on acceptable uses, and then an update to our schedule for that, how we're going to proceed with that what I call the funds disposition discussion schedule. So you'll see that frequently in the upcoming months. Development update was also included. Want to talk just really briefly about gypsy moths. I had over the last week or so 5 reports of gypsy moths in Patton Township. They seem to be really isolated incidences. I've gone around a little bit. I haven't actually seen, I've seen the damage to some trees, a few trees. I haven't actually seen a moth myself, but we've seen people report them. The state did spray over in Black Moshannon this year in May for control, which means they had an infestation the year before. As you recall, the pattern on gypsy moths is normally they fly in the early spring. They actually, the little moths do what they call ballooning. They send out a little silk trailer. It gets picked up in the wind. They get blown in from somewhere else that had an infestation. And then they land in a tree in our neighborhoods and they start eating. And they go through several stages, and they go from very small to probably about that big before they finally become moths and live for a couple of days as moths and lay eggs in that whole 9 yards. But the typical pattern is, and I just say this so everybody understands where we're going and what we might try to do, is we get an infestation, they chew up a bunch of trees. By the time we realize what's going on, it's too late to spray the BT insecticide. We're very reluctant to use other insecticides because while the BT is very targeted at gypsy moths, the other insecticides are not, and they will kill pollinators and almost lots of other things. So once you get into June, it's probably too late to spray. So then we do egg mass surveys in the fall, and we figure out a spraying plan for the next year. And then we spray generally in early to mid-May, and that controls it. I will get a price this year to do a preemptive spraying for some of our denser neighborhoods, and I'll get that back to the board at some point when we start, probably in October. And when we start looking at budget and see if we want to do it. I don't think the state's doing any subsidy on spraying. So I just want you to know it may be coming. On the other hand, it may not, but it's never it's never pleasant to be in our neighborhoods when we have a gypsy moth infestation, and people always are expecting us to perform miracles that generally don't happen. Any questions on gypsy moths? I can send you lots of information if you want, links to websites and all that stuff. Yes, Anita?
Just to say that you can tell they're here by when they chew the leaves, it's like little leaf cutting. And if you walk around my neighborhood, you'll see those little leaves on people's driveways. They're probably harder to spot in the lawn, but they're here. We've had them on our property. Neighbors have had them. Not the huge number that I recall from years before, but yeah, they're here.
The technical term for those leaf droppings is dross, D-R-O-S-S.
Oh, okay.
This is why I know more about this subject than I really do.
or frass, I might add.
Okay.
And I believe the BT is also impacts other Lepidopteran, so it's not just a gypsy moth. That would be anyway.
anything else on Gypsy? Any other questions or comments? But we're keeping an eye on it, and hopefully hopefully the state will step up a little bit, but at this point they're not making noises to that effect. Penn State football, as we all hear, will be back in business for 2021. Had a brief discussion with the football operations manager, and she says at this point they're planning to use the 2019 parking plan. And I said, that's fine. It worked well in 2019. We would expect it to work again in 2021. So I noted development update was enclosed. The Burnell Fox Hill intersection improvements are very close to being done. We did a final inspection today. There's a few punch list items, but I think they were planning on pulling all the traffic control by mid next week. Did want to note that we did have a couple of complaints about the Heims and their noise waiver that was provided to them. We did send an officer out at 1 a.m. who had to ask them to turn things down. I did relay back to their representative that they could probably expect to have their next request denied. I don't know if there's any other questions or comments about that. Chief Jolly and I have talked about some changes to protocols and processing we might do with future waivers, and we'll probably bring a proposal back. If we get time to write it up, we'll bring it back in July to look at for for future noise waiver requests. Any questions about that?
Well,
finally, just
Doug, let me just reflect that the current wording in the noise waiver, which I pointed out at the time, clearly would require us to deny the waiver because first of all, it wasn't submitted 60 days prior to the event. It was submitted a week prior to the event. So in my view, that was automatic disapproval, but the other board members disagreed anyway. So if you want to revise the protocol, you need to decide whether or not that's going to be not enforceable because it's not breaking anything. But if you want to keep that requirement in the waiver request, because that, you know, I don't like the idea that board members can just say, oh, well, we're going to ignore that particular requirement in this case. It's giving a special exemption to one party, which to me is very unfair. It's not something I would ever support. Anyway, that's my spiel.
Yeah, we're contemplating some process that might involve a application fee and process where we would send out notices from the township. So definitely would need more time than we've required up till now. And a couple other things, like I said, we'll put that together and bring it back to the board. Finally, the office obviously will be closed July 5th, observance of Independence Day. Chief already talked about the child seat event on Friday, and just there will be a Juneteenth celebration on Saturday down at the MLK Plaza in downtown State College.
Let me jump in on the July 5th Independence Day. The Fourth Fest Committee has already announced that they're only going to hold fireworks at one location at Medlar Field this year. Yep. So it will not recur in Patton Township like it happened, like they had last year.
And lastly, I don't know if the board wants to have another discussion about meeting format. And I know Harris Township went back to in-person meetings this week. We think we've accommodated all state laws by providing the public access device. But you know, it's kind of a moving target right now, is what's the minimum we need to do to provide appropriate public access to make sure we aren't violating sunshine law.
Anybody want to comment? Betsy?
Are you talking specifically about the public access? Advisor, you're talking about
Well,
going back for public meetings. right?
Well, I think I'm gonna notify Cindy Hahn at CNET that we'll probably, that she should plan on probably us having a hybrid meeting in July. Like I said, there's a device, there's an iPad sitting in the library. If somebody should walk into the building, there's signs on the doors that say walk in here, and you can participate on the Zoom meeting. I think, you know, can everybody else be virtual at that point, or do we need to do something hybrid or something like that? But I think, you know, at some point we may, you know, again, you may want to consider or think about changing the time back to a more traditional time or not. I think we've been okay for now, but as people head back to their traditional workplaces, 5 o'clock may not be the best time again. Worked well during pandemic, but post-pandemic, I'll leave that for questions to be answered by the board in the future.
Anita?
I strongly support hybrid for the public's sake as well as weather's sake. Can you imagine if we had the 44 people who spoke on Zoom waiting to speak in person? I think those who are able to access Zoom, I think it's better for the public. And also, I think during the pandemic, we've learned that in-person meeting, it used to be that the people in Zoom on the wall, maybe it was hard to fully integrate them in a discussion with other folks around the table. But I think that over these past times, in different formats, that people who are Zooming in are fully integrated into the full meeting. I think it's better for the public. And just speaking, for instance, for the Housing Task Force, when we bring our report, 18 of us, it would certainly be better if many of those can Zoom in to be available for questions. So I personally think all Zoom is great, but I appreciate that some people might not have that technical capability, but I would at least strongly support hybrid.
Anybody else? Pam, go ahead.
I agree with Anita. Doing our COG committees, that same question has come up about us meeting in person, and the positive is the participation of our residents. More residents have participated on many of the issues that we have presented through Zoom. With the option with our board members, we have all kind of suggested that we are comfortable continuing doing our meetings remote until, you know, they can really get a handle on our situation with COVID. You know, not everybody is vaccinated. Not everybody feels comfortable even yet not wearing masks in a closed-in situation or even out in the public. We're still in that quandra of feeling safe. And until we get to a position that everyone feels safe, I will make the suggestion to continue doing it remote.
Okay, Betsy, go ahead.
I'll just put in my 2 cents for the hybrid so that we can do both remote, and also put in a plug for the camaraderie that occurs when we meet in person, as well as the offline business chats or special interest chats that can occur between board members and the public and so on. So we all know those benefits too. But right now, hybrid's good.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone said. The only issue for me is to make sure that we still are legal, that our meetings are still legal, that in other words, that whatever action the board takes is legal and it can't be challenged that we weren't complying with the second-class township code requirements, and therefore any actions we take are illegal at a session like that. So our solicitor gave approval to the setup Doug came up with tonight, having a public access device located in the township building, because that's a legal requirement, right, Doug? There should be.
Yeah, that's the sunshine law that requires that there be a physical place that somebody can come to.
Right. So as long as that's legal, I'm happy to continue with hybrid meetings, and I agree with everyone else. The public participation really increased tremendously when we were meeting on Zoom. So we definitely need to continue this option for citizen participation via hybrid meeting. Anything else, Doug?
Well, I will inform CNET that we'll have a hybrid meeting, so they'll be in the building next month, and probably at least a couple of us will be down in the meeting room, and if the public wants to come in.
I'll be one. I'm happy to attend in person.
Okay, so we can plan on that, and I mean, we'll all still, I still recommend you bring I have several devices here that we can use, but it's still, even when we're doing hybrid, it's easier if everybody has their own device. They can at least have video on, and then we'll use the room audio for the audio portion. Okay, and then at this point, we're still at 5 p.m. for July, so
yeah. Okay.
Now that follow-up discussion after the July meeting, if there's want to be any change on that. And that's all I have.
Okay, let's go to item 10, committee reports. We have written committee reports. Any member of the committee wishes to expand on your report? Pam, Rob, go ahead.
On my public safety report, there two issues came up. We had a report from the fire director, Steve Baird, on the long-term operations for Patton Fire Station. I requested, after the financial and the facility committee's review, that Chief does a presentation to our board regarding our fire station. There were a couple of major concerns that came up during that report that I think that our board should be informed of. So at that particular incident, I hope that Chief Baird will be able to give us some kind of feedback on their findings. On another issue that came up there at the Public Safety Committee was from LifeLink. We do know that they did close one of their facilities that was in Patton, but they're also looking to do a cyber station, which would house one ambulance and a crew at that facility. So they are going to be reaching out to Doug to look for another location in Patton because of Patton's location to address issues that come up, their services for our Patton residents. So I thought that was quite important that we are informed of. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Pam. Anyone else want to expand on your report? I'll take the opportunity on the Finance Committee. There's one item that, well, at least one item that will be coming up for discussion by the Exec Committee and then forwarded on to the General Forum that you should know about is COG's electric contract agreement is up for renewal, and Joe Vigilone has contacted multiple energy generator entities to basically bid on a contract, which would be for 20 months, because they anticipate that in 20 months, the solar power purchase collaborative would be likely to be online and then seeking bids for 100% solar power for all the participating entities, not just municipalities, but the State College School District and Benner, I think Bellefonte Borough, right, Betsy? All those. So anyway.
Yes, and yes.
So the point is, all the bids he got were striated, meaning, there was a bid for just solar power supply without regard to the source, and that obviously is the cheapest, and it probably means most of the source is going to come from natural gas generating the power. Then the next level would be considering sustainable energy sources. And one of them was called just carbon free, but carbon free also included possible generation by hydroelectric and nuclear power plants. And the third option was to purchase renewable energy credits and specify that the energy source does not include nuclear or hydroelectric, given environmental concerns people have with nuclear power and hydroelectric power. The Finance Committee is going to recommend the third option, anticipating that we would have some citizens object to our receipt of energy sources that include nuclear and hydroelectric. So that's what is the Exec Committee is going to be reviewing next week, I think, is our meeting, right, Pam? So Pam and I will be there, and then you'll hear at the General Forum meeting what the Exec Committee approved regarding that contract. Any questions on that? Okay, let's move on. What's next? We finished meeting reports. Any other business? Anita, go ahead. You're muted, Anita.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Briefly, I believe all of us supervisors received the email from Patton Township Girl Scout named Morgan Pandolfi about her project Music Takes Flight at Burnell Road Park. And she's raised 93% of the $4,000 for this musical instrument that will be placed out in the park. I gather it's going to be similar to what is in the Penn State Arboretum, where kids can go and make music on like a xylophone thing. But she's $275 short of her $4,000 goal. And I remember when our supervisors gave a donation to the Volunteers in Medicine. I don't know if it's appropriate to give a supervisor's or township donation to a project in one of our parks, but I raised that issue just in case it is.
Okay, before we take that up as a board discussion item, Pam, did you have something you also wanted to bring up?
Oh, yes. What I wanted to bring up is it possible, Doug, that we can put on our website, congratulating the 2021 graduates throughout, Patton Township? I think we need to put something up to let them know that all the graduates that are in our township, that we, how proud we all are, that, you know, they're graduating throughout this, COVID pandemic. It's outstanding that they continue to, do their work and now graduate, to all our students. So if it's at all possible that we can put it on our website, would be appreciated. Thank you.
Doug shaking his head yes, so assume the rest of the board members agree. You can do something for all graduates, not just high school.
Yep.
Okay, back to Anita's request. She's proposing the board submit or make a contribution to Morgan Pandolfi's Girl Scout Honors Project, whatever the proper title is. Pam raised her hand, yes. Betsy says yes. Okay, let me just expand, remind everyone that she's not the only scout doing a special project.
Yeah.
And if we fund one person's project, are we then setting a precedent that should be approached by the other scouts doing special projects that impact our township?
Yeah,
For funding?
That's a very good point. Yeah, that's why I wanted to raise it. People can contribute individually.
Yes, of course.
She's done such a superb community campaign that I'm sure she'll reach her goal. At the least, I think we should, as a board, commend her for, and maybe commend every scout that we hear about who does a public service project in Patton Township. I think they're all admirable. So, just to take note to say, thank you, Morgan, for organizing a project that is going to benefit not just the people that visit the park, but all those kids who get to have fun playing this musical instrument. Maybe that is sufficient. I just think she needs to be recognized. So, and for future scouts as well. Good for them for doing projects that benefit the residents of our township. Nope, that's a good point. And
Anita, can you get us some information?
well, she sent an email. Did everyone receive it? I had a sense she was sending it to each of the supervisors.
So if I could just jump in real quick. So Morgan Pandolfi was the one who, she presented this to us a year ago. So this was, she presented before the board, and she and her mom together worked with me. Andrea Pandolfi is her mother who speaks frequently, and she reached out to me, and so we essentially gave our approval to the project. Didn't give her any money, but the fact that she specifically targeted this project for Patton Township Park, I think is a little different from a scout project at random. And I also think that she has raised all but she's raised almost $5,000 or $4,000, I forget. So I feel a little differently that it's not just your run-of-the-mill Girl Scout projects, but so I would vote to essentially fill in the gap.
I can get you. I'll have Susan put together a summary of scout projects we've had over the last 5 years.
Really?
Just so you have a sense of what all's going on.
Okay, in Patton Township.
Yeah.
Oh, I stand corrected. That's great then.
So is the board wanting to take action?
I withdraw my recommendation.
I will say that I made a contribution early on personally, and so any board member who wants to, or anybody wants to throw in $25, that would, go a ways to helping her out.
Yeah, I made a contribution also. So yeah. personally. And maybe as we get our new website up and running, if our communications person comes on board, I think it's wonderful to salute anyone who contributes to Patton Township. And maybe there could be a honoring scout project that do that in multiple ways.
Okay.
We can send a thank you. I can put together a draft template for a letter for thank yous and probably some sort of certificate to go along with that. So.
That would be great.
And please send me the information. Thank you.
Yeah, Pam, you know, remember she has trouble getting her email via her Patton Township email address. So that's probably where it went instead of her personal email, which we now utilize.
Sure.
Any further discussion? Any other business?
Yes, happy Father's Day to all the fathers, since we won't be seeing each other till July.
Thank you, Pam. Okay.